All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. David Patrick Carey with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have a timely, obviously it's Christmas time. Merry Christmas to everyone. And blessed nativity to all my Orthodox brothers and sisters. We have a sponsored stream by the one and only author, Robert John Hammond. You guys will know I've covered a handful of his books already. But this one, I got to say, this one is absolutely one of my favorite. Now, I loved all his books. We've talked about, he's got a documentary, American Orthodox. We've gone through his books. Most recently, he was actually on the channel to discuss his book, The Loved Disciple, about St. John the Theologian. Well, today we're going to be diving into his newest book, and I'm going to encourage all of my Orthodox brothers and sisters, especially if you have children, to get this book right here, Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker, The Real Story of Santa Claus. And the reason why, and today we're going to be, well, I'll explain what we're going to be doing here in a few, but the reason why I think every Orthodox parent should get this book for your children is, one, John does a great, these aren't academic, highly falutin theological texts. The way John writes is very poetic. It's very cinematic. And I was very aware of St. Nicholas. I think I've done two or three, at least two, probably three, maybe four streams specifically on Christmas. We've looked at Shaman Claus theory, the idea that Santa Claus actually originates from Siberian shamanism, of which we're going to debunk very quickly today. We looked into one stream, we did the variety of different Santa Clauses, from Santa Claus to Father Christmas, and all these different entities and where they come from. And I've talked about St. Nicholas as the true Santa Claus. But even in my stream on St. Nicholas as the true Santa Claus, we really didn't dive too deeply into some of the details of his life. Everybody's familiar with the gold coins and the shoes regarding the gentleman who had three daughters, Callictus, that was the name I was looking for. Callictus, he had three daughters. He had no money, and unfortunately, he felt like he was destined to sell his daughters essentially into sexual slavery, become prostitutes, because he had no dowry for them to marry. Most people are familiar with this. St. Nicholas then drops gold coins through the window into the shoes of one of the eldest daughter. Callictus then sees this. He wakes up. He sees the gold. He's excited. He's ecstatic. The next day, he's able to use that money to establish a dowry and have an honorific marriage for his oldest daughter. But then he thought, geez, well, what am I going to do now for my next two daughters? And as the story goes, St. Nicholas returned two more nights in a row, to provide gold coins for the other daughters. And this kind of sets the standard for, him as the gift giver. However, the thing that John does, and why this is such a good book for children, is a parent could read this to your child, and it's filled with miracles. It's filled with awe. It's filled with a love and devotion for Christ. It's a true story. And in fact, I would say reading this book is a better story than the general, as we'll get into, the post 19th century, 20th century creation of modern day Santa Claus with Rudolph and the reindeers and all this different stuff. It's appealing to children, has magic, it has mysticism to it, it has the supernatural element, but so does this. And this is actually real. And so just some of the stuff that we're going to be getting into that I imagine, and I'm going to be reading from this book, and it's not super long. I mean, you can easily get through this in just a couple hours. It's just a little over 100 pages long, and it has a nice hardback. This is John Hammond's most recent book. And let me share the link with you guys, because I have the link right here. It's also posted in the video description. So if anybody is interested, but some of the stuff that this book talks about that I wasn't even personally familiar with regarding St. Nicholas is, obviously we're familiar with him and the gold coins, him becoming the Bishop of Myra. But how many of you were aware of his persecution under Diocletian? How many of you guys were aware that St. Nicholas was actually imprisoned somewhere between 6 to 10 years I wasn't aware fully of the incarceration that he went through and the torture that he went through. How many people are aware that Saint Nicholas getting out of prison under the Diocletian persecution of Christians came through Constantine? We've covered Saint Constantine, Emperor Constantine, and the battle at the Milvian Bridge, right? The turning point in Roman history that turns the Roman Empire into the Christian Empire. It is this battle. We actually watched one of the I think it was a Kings and Generals or History Marche video where it showed the battle at the Milvian Bridge, and we saw how Constantine, though outnumbered, though against all odds, used the Chi Rho and defeated the pagans, the gods of the old world, allowing him in the next year. The battle's in 312. In 313, we get the Edict of Milan, essentially legalizing Christianity. Eventually, we'll get the Edict of Thessaloniki, which then establishes the Roman Empire as explicitly Orthodox Christian. But how many of you guys were aware of the connection between Constantine's military victory and the releasement of Saint Nicholas? How many of you guys were aware that it's then Constantine that sends his personal invitation and summons Saint Nicholas to the Council of Nicaea? Many of you are already going to be aware of Saint Nicholas slapping Arius at the Council of Nicaea, but how many of you guys knew that he was then arrested after he slapped Arius? It was a scandal. Technically, you weren't even supposed to act in any sort of violent manner in front of the emperor. Constantine was present. He was residing over the council. And he said, technically, you're supposed to be in prison for, being violent in front of the emperor. I'll let the bishops decide. The bishops then put St. Nicholas in jail. We'll get into the miracle that occurred while he was in jail, but then he's eventually let back out. How many of you guys were aware then that once he got back out, so after he's been tortured in prison for 6 to 10 years, he goes back to Myra, he's summoned for the Council of Nicaea, he slaps Arius, he's in jail at most 2 months. So the Council of Nicaea, I was trying to find the exact dates, it's kind of debated. General agreement is 2 months and 12 days is how long the Council of Nicaea took place. So we don't know which day Arius was slapped by St. Nicholas, but at some point earlier, I would assume earlier in the council, St. Nicholas just could not deal with hearing Arius defame and blaspheme the divinity of Christ, slaps him, goes to jail. We'll say roughly 2 months later, he's out, returns back to Myra, where he's bishop, and destroys the idol temple of Diana or Artemis, depending if you want to use the Greek or the Roman terminology. We're going to cover that. How many of you guys know about the story of 3 Roman soldiers who are then sent by Constantine to put down some rebellion in Phrygia, end up stopping to see Saint Nicholas of Myra? And he hosts them. And while he's hosting them, we find out that 3 Christians in the town square are getting ready to be executed for being falsely accused of being thieves. And what does he do? He rushes to the town square with these 3 Roman soldiers, these 3 centurions, and prevents essentially the execution of his Christian flock, 3 gentlemen who were totally innocent. And what does St. Nicholas do after he pulls the sword out of the man's hand while he's getting ready to behead the first Christian? Again, these Roman centurions were blown away by St. Nicholas and his fearlessness. Well, he then marches straight to the house of the governor, which again, unheard of. And he goes up to the governor and tells him, I know, one, you allowed the execution of 3 innocent people that you knew were in it. And he said, I didn't know they were innocent. He goes, yeah, you did, because you were bribed to kill them, which again, nobody knew. So through a sort of mystical clairvoyance, St. Nicholas then accuses the governor of being bribed to kill these 3 Christian men, of which then he recounts immediately because he's blown away the fact that St. Nicholas even knew that that's what occurred because it was done in private, and then begs for his mercy. How many of you guys are aware of all the stories in which St. Nicholas appears to sailors and protects them during immense storms out at sea? So this is the kind of stuff that we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to be reading some of this in John Hammond's book. So again, if you guys have children, you know, everybody's familiar with "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." And I get it, especially in the American context, how that is a sort of fixture of American Christian culture. But as Orthodox Christians, I think this book should be the #1 Christmas read. I'm genuine. This book, and then if you were to read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," or you then encounter the secularized, paganized Santa Claus that we're so familiar with today, you can reframe it for your child. In fact, oh, this is just a symbol of Saint Nicholas, because as we'll see today, he truly embodies the spirit of Christmas. He gave up wealth for the poor. We'll be talking about how Saint Nicholas, his parents were actually wealthy. And his father, when he found out that his wife was pregnant, was excited for a boy because he wanted a boy to inherit his estate and his wealth. But from a very, very early age, we see that St. Nicholas has a different calling. At a very early age, he's interested in reading and learning, devoted to scriptures, prayer at a young age. And he's named after his father's brother, St. Nicholas, or Nicholas, a Bishop Nicholas, I should say. I don't know if his uncle was a saint, but he gets the name Nicholas from his brother's brother, who is a Christian bishop. And his brother's brother, St. Nicholas's uncle, Nicholas, Bishop Nicholas, saw in the young man that he was destined for something different. And his father, Theophanus, almost lamented the fact that his son wasn't going to be the inheritor of his estate, because at a very young age, as a young man, he's already becoming a priest. He's already devoting his life to Christ. And then once his parents die, as we'll talk about here when we get into the book, once his parents die, not only does he have to bury them both due to a famine with his own hands, which he does, his heart's absolutely broken, because not only does his father die from famine, but his mother dies a week later just due to the devastation of her husband dying. It shows you, again, an immense Christian love between husband and wife, but a fact that isn't totally uncommon. My grandparents, for example, when my grandfather on my mom's side passed away, I remember my grandma immediately saying that she was ready to die. She didn't want to live without, my grandfather. And she, within a fairly short period, she also passed away. So the grief of when somebody you truly love passes away. Anyways, St. Nicholas, then his parents dead, inherits all his father's estate and his wealth. What's he do? He gives it all away to the poor, to the needy. So there's your gift giving. Devoted to Christ at an early age. He exorcised demons. We'll be reading a section in which he comes across a man who's possessed by a demon when he's early in his ministry, exorcises a demon in public. Destroyed pagan temples. As we said, we're going to be reading the story in which he goes into the temple of Artemis, Diana, and he just starts tearing down the altar, smashing anything he could get his hands on. Other Christians, then seeing the bishop of Myra do this, blown away, they go into the pagan temple and they start helping him tear stuff down. When they walk out of the temple, imagine this. They walk out of the temple. Now they're destroying the altars and the stuff inside. They walk out of the temple, and through an act of God, the entire temple comes crumbling down, which again, for that, validated the Christian God, validated the message of St. Nicholas, and reinforced the faith of the local people. There's a story of him exorcising a demon in a local well, him cutting down a pagan tree that some of the yet to convert Christians were worshiping a cypress tree, believing that there was a God inside of it. So what's he do? He gets an axe. He walks over to it, and to the astonishment of everybody, because they're like, oh my God, the God's going to hurt. He cuts the damn thing down. That's who we're talking about today. Destroyer of pagan temples, persecuted under Diocletian. The torture that he endured, again, from anywhere between 6 to 10 years, is horrific. It wasn't as bad as some of the other bishops. When Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea, bishops from all over the Roman Empire come. Some of them are totally disfigured through the torture that the Romans did against Christians. Could have been fire. There was men with their faces deformed because they were put a flame on their face, fingers missing, hands missing, all types of torture. These are the bishops that establish the Nicene Creed and condemn Arius at the Council of Nicaea. Saved innocent people from execution. This is one of the reasons why he is, a sort of patron saint of the innocent. In multiple instances in his life does he go out of his way to save innocent people, caring more about others than himself. Again, kind of the whole spirit of Christmas, if you will. Thousands of stories of him appearing or helping or rescuing men at sea. He is the patron saint of travelers. This is why, if you are Orthodox, especially if you come from Russia or a Slavic nation, it is almost customary to put an icon of Saint Nicholas in your car. Why? Because he's the protector of travelers. There's stories, and this isn't unique, this isn't a one-off, but John mentions one in particular, of which, while he was still living, and there's multiple instances in which he himself, on his pilgrimage to Jerusalem and the Holy Land, is in the midst of a great sea storm, and through his own prayers, was able to calm the storm. Again, not through any sort of magical power, it's through the appeal to God. It's that he was such a holy man. His prayers, his appeal are heard by God. But one in particular, while he was still living, there's a group of seamen at sailing, and a massive storm emerges. It's getting ready to break the ship in half, and the men start calling on the name of the Bishop of Myra. Again, this is why Saint Nicholas is still alive, because the stories and the miracles associated with him were so renowned. Saint Constantine, Emperor Constantine, again, Emperor Constantine's first encounter with Saint Nicholas is him slapping Arius and then getting arrested. But then there's all these other instances that we're going to be talking about. Emperor Constantine eventually sends gold, fine silk, gifts, Christian relics to Saint Nicholas himself because of how renowned he was during his lifetime. These are the things that we were aware of Saint Nicholas. We're aware of the gold coins. We're aware that he's the original Santa Claus. But some of these details that I want to share with you today, these I think most people don't know. And this is why John Hammond's book, it's so readable, a child could understand it, right? And he puts it in a very artistic, cinematic way. Like, I think what I would love is somebody who does animations out there needs to animate this book. So that we have a true life of Saint Nicholas. I was just searching YouTube on things on the life of Saint Nicholas, and it's not it's kind of the basic stuff. There's not tons of detail. I'm sure there's some that are, but a really well done animation of this book would go so far for young children and for people just learning about the faith. So, of course, his life, then, he's also a Myr streamer. So upon his repose, the day of his repose, the next morning when he reposes at night, the next morning when the faithful go to find St. Nicholas in his cell at the church that he always slept in, it's filled with myrrh. So much myrrh that it began to be like a pool of myrrh. Then it's literally flowing like a stream of myrrh. And people were touching the myrrh and being blessed with miracles of healing immediately. And his body has continued to be a myrrh streamer. Sadly, eventually the Latins, and you can understand why, but they take the relics of Saint Nicholas from Anatolia, which this is during the 11th century. And during the 11th century, Islam was a massive problem for the Byzantine Empire. So as much as it breaks my heart to even think about the Latins coming and stealing the relics of Saint Nicholas to take him to Bari, Italy, which is a fact. That's where his relics are today. I get it. I hate it, but I do get it. The idea was that they wanted to preserve the relics of Saint Nicholas from the Muslims who would probably destroy them. And so under the blanket of night, these Westerners go and they steal the body and the relics of Saint Nicholas and take him back to Italy. So again, anybody who's studied the Fourth Crusade, if you're Orthodox, not too fond of it, hurts a little bit still just to read about the Fourth Crusade. But even this, the stealing of Saint Nicholas's relics, it hurts a bit, but I do get it. And so they, because of, I mean, imagine if they were still in Anatolia, they'd probably be totally destroyed. And so they were moved to a new basilica in Bari, Italy, which is where they remain today. So this is what we're going to be getting into today. So smash that like, guys. Thank you all from here. Again, a major shout out to Robert John Hammond. Excuse me. Man, something got in my throat. A major thank you to Robert John Hammond for sponsoring today's stream. A major thank you for all your work, brother. You've done, I mean, look at this. Look at, he's got 5 books here and a documentary. He's all done for Orthodoxy. The man is, you know, John, your work ethic is impressive. Oh, here's John right here. He says a good animated movie about Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker would be awesome. Sounds like a job for Logo Cinema. Well, absolutely. Whoever has the animation skills absolutely needs to do something like that. So I do have, so before we start diving into John's book, there was something that I wanted to present today. So let me show you a little bit of the links. There are some links that John wanted me to share with you guys. And then I have a little bit of an intro monologue type thing. It's a very small document I put together, but the point that I wanted to do today is I wanted to talk about the paganization of Saint Nicholas. So everybody talks about Santa Claus and all this stuff, and, you know, Coca-Cola and Thomas Nast and the development of the modern Santa and the mythology, but there's not enough emphasis on how Protestants actually re-paganize Saint Nicholas. And so I have at least 15, 20 minutes I want to spend before we dive into this book is actually defending Saint Nicholas and highlighting to you guys the detriments of the Reformation, because if it wasn't for the Reformation and their reluctance to venerate saints, we wouldn't have Santa Claus as he's presented today, this sort of commercialized, secularized, magical entity. The only way he comes about is because the Reformation refused to venerate saints to such a degree, they were willing to incorporate pagan myths and legends into a new figure, a sort of gift giver, if you will, that is not explicitly a saint, because they rejected the veneration of saints. So I put together a little something to basically articulate this point, and I'm going to probably make it a clip video after the stream, is that it's the Protestants that paganized Santa Claus. So anyways, before we do that, I do want to share some links with you guys. So here is again, if you want to get, I highly recommend, if you have children, get this book. This is such a good book for every Orthodox parent. You can read it. Again, if you do nightly readings, just 2 nights of reading, you'll get through this whole book. If your children are able to sit for an hour to 2 hours, you could probably read the whole thing. And if your children, I mean, I think a child 7 or over could actually read this as well and understand it. So highly recommend. You can get it right here on Amazon. I have a shorter link. Let me use the shorter link. It's in my video description. There you go. There's the shorter link. So here is Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker. Lycia, we're not going to be focusing too much on this, but just so you know where Saint Nicholas is born, again, for context, for years, Saint Nicholas is born in 270 and dies in 343. So he's from Lycia right here. And I just wanted to use, we're not going to be focusing on it, but just so you guys know where he's from, it's the southern point in Anatolia right here that our beloved Saint Nicholas is from. I may appeal to some of these things in regards to the artwork that moved Saint Nicholas into modern Santa Claus. But I don't really have a whole lot of images in the document I put together. I really just wanted to kind of present the information for you guys. But if you're interested, and we've talked about this before with some of these streams we've done with John, is he has a documentary called American Orthodox, The Lost Icon. We've watched the trailer, I think 3 or 4 times on this channel. But here is the link for anybody who wants to dive into this great documentary exploring the Orthodox faith in the American context. Check this out. Also, he sent me this link as well. So Logo Cinema announces premiere partnership with American Orthodox, a landmark documentary exploring faith and modern America. I'll share this link with you as well. And Logo Cinema, I've heard about this a couple different times. It looks like it's a streaming software for Orthodox Christians. I'm not exactly sure all the content on there, but they've got Robert John Hammond's documentary American Orthodox, and it looks like it's going to be launching this month. So John wanted me to let everybody know that Logo Cinema, they can be notified when the site launches this month, and they are looking for Orthodox content creators. So I don't know if that means live streamers like myself or people with more refined, like a documentary is more of a refined content, animations, stuff like this. But if you're interested and you want to support, check out logocinema.com. This was mentioned actually at the Athens and Jerusalem conference. So I'd be very interested to hear more about Logo Cinema and everything they're going to be getting into and promoting, and how potentially live streamers or podcast hosts could put their content on there or make money from it. So I'm not totally sure on the details, but I just wanted to share all that stuff with you guys before we got started. So looks like we got a super chat. Thomas throws in 5, says, "You better not pout. You better be nice. You better not doubt the divinity of Christ, or Santa Claus will backhand your face." I love that one. Thank you for that, Thomas. Really appreciate the $5. Oh, Logo Cinema just sends in 10. Thanks for the shout out. John has been awesome to work with. Keep up the great work, DPH. Would love to partner up sometime. Oh, great. Well, I'd love to, chat more about what you guys are up to. It sounds like a great project. Logo Cinema, thank you very much for the $10 super chat. Would love to hear more. Yeah, maybe we can talk privately about everything that you guys are doing. But shout out to you guys, Logo Cinema. Thank you very much. God bless you and the projects you guys are working on. Let's see. So first thing is I want to talk a little bit. Let me just double check real quick. Hold on. Okay, John Newby just throws in $15 over on the Dono chat. Shout out to Mr. Newby. He's a member over at the Logos Academy. Really appreciate him. He says, "Merry Christmas, Doc. Saint Nick is my son's saint. Glory to the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit." Awesome, Newby. Well, with the fact that Newby just mentioned that, I guess I have to do my quick housekeeping. Might as well just do this now. For you guys, I run an all men's Orthodox Academy. Essentially, it's a learning, philosophical, theological, masculine development type community. Jonathan Newby, who is in the top 10 in the world for strongman competitors. He was just in Ireland this year competing on behalf of the United States. He's an Orthodox Christian. He's in our group. Anybody that was at DebateCon probably met Newby. He was also there. But I wanted to just show you guys what we're doing here. So I just put up a poll 2 days ago over on the Logos Academy to look at, we do these think tanks. Sometimes they're free flowing. We talk about anything, but we're going to be moving in, especially into 2026, onto specifically topic themed think tanks each month. And I've been telling the group that I'd like to do organized readings together. So I just put together a list just to see the vibe of people and what they thought about topics to do over at the Logos Academy. And so it looks like reading through Father Seraphim Rose's Orthodox Survival Course, which is going to take multiple sessions. Maybe we'll read 2 chapters at a time for each meeting so we can actually digest and move through content. To do the whole thing would be too much. But we can see multiple people are interested in doing multiple sessions, think tank sessions, on the Orthodox survival course. So that looks like is what we're going to be doing next is reading. I have the PDF, so I'll be posting it in the Logos Academy. People download it. We'll read the introduction in chapter 1. It's on scholasticism and stuff like that. And then we'll do our first meeting together. So other topics that I mentioned, you can see Max Moore and Praise of the Devil, which is an article that I read in one of my streams here. It's a transhumanist article praising Lucifer, Satan, the devil, and condemning the Christian God. I also was going to do one on Emperor Justinian's restoration. This is like a 5-part YouTube video series that I was going to have people watch, and then we can get together and talk about Emperor Justinian, his restoration, the early Eastern Roman Empire, masculinity, leadership, that type of thing. Another one, potential one, was the Gates of Toledo, how Spain was conquered by the Muslims. Some of you guys may be familiar with the Gates of Toledo. Orthodox eschatology. The Eschaton Vigil is a member of the Logos Academy. So we were thinking about doing multiple sessions where we dive into eschatology that we've done on these streams, but you can actually talk to people, have a group reading. Nobody was interested in this book, which I was a little surprised. Ivan Ilyin on resistance to evil by force. This is talking about when does physical force, when is it actually blessed or a legitimate utility for the Orthodox Christian to utilize. That's what this book is about. Not many people were interested in reading that one. You can see it didn't get any votes. Father Stephen DeYoung, Man is a God of War. I was offering that we could read through this book. Again, these aren't super big, so you can break these up into like 2 or 3 think tanks and you'd be done with the whole book. There was some interest. And then the last one was C.S. Lewis, The Great Divorce. I actually just bought this at an Orthodox bookstore recently. Never read it. It's kind of a, it's a fictitious story. But I've heard it's really good, and I bought it at an Orthodox bookstore. So I was offering this. There's a couple people. There's at least 3 that are interested in that. But I only bring this up to show you the type of content and the type of conversations we're having over there and what we're getting into. And so if you guys would be interested in actually, because we're going to be doing the Orthodox study, the Orthodox survival course by Father Seraphim Rose. If you guys are interested in reading that and joining a community of men that will be exploring that topic together, you can do so with this link right here and join the Logos Academy. We'd love to have you. Also, if anybody's interested in sponsoring a stream, you can do so with this link right here. I got multiple sponsored streams I'm going to be diving into, of which today is one. Again, a major shout out to John Hammond. Go by Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker. Get this for your Orthodox children. I'm telling you, you won't regret it. But if you'd like to sponsor a stream, you can do so with this link right here. If you'd like to set up a one-on-one session where we talk about whatever your heart desires, you can do so with that link right there. Also, don't forget to get my book. It'd be a wonderful Christmas present, right? Any ladies, I mean, my audience is like 95% men. If there happened to be a lady in the audience, it's a great gift for your husband, I promise. But you can get signed copies through my website, or you can use the Amazon link and get the cheaper versions. We got paperback, hardback, and Kindle. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please support my authorship and my book that way. Also, if anybody's interested, we are in the fast. So if anybody's interested in a cookbook for the fast, I recommend this one right here by our brother Seraphim Braden Vurick. And he has a foreword by Father Moses. If you guys are interested in this, you can get a discount by using this link right here. This is a Gumroad link I'm posting in the chat now. You use that, you can get a discount on this cookbook, and it shows you how to keep your gains during a fasting period. Also, if anybody is interested in peptides, I have my affiliate Level Up Health, and they have some of the highest quality peptide supplements on the market. And they are a little expensive, but if you use promo code COTEL, COTEL, you'll get a discount. And I can say I'm on my 2nd month of BPC 157. I am a fan. I have noticed a difference. It's helped me repair some of the nagging injuries I've had. So if that's something you're interested in, go to Level Up Health. Check out, they got neuro regenerators and stuff that I'd like to use. I haven't, but if it's something that you're interested in, use promo code CODAL and you'll get a discount. Also, if you're looking for any Orthodox items, check out orthodoxdepot.com. Also use promo code COTEL, COTEL, and you will get a discount on those as well. Okay. I do have an interesting announcement. After this, I promise we'll be topic focused and we'll be staying on Saint Nicholas the rest of the stream. I do have an interesting announcement. I've been working with a couple people to put together a new collection of t-shirt merchandise that is totally unique. They're all black t-shirts, so we're only doing one color. But these are very unique Orthodox themed shirts. I have a whole series. We're going to be putting together a whole series. Again, major thank you to Rob and his wife who have been helping me. They know who they are. But we have a series on warrior saints. We have a series on American saints. We have some schema stuff, like very cool Orthodox aesthetics, kind of like Death to the World aesthetic. But we're going to be, my whole store, all the merchandise is coming down. We're putting up new t-shirts that are legitimately cool. So I have all that stuff up hopefully by the beginning of the year, but I'm excited to show you guys what we put together. But anyways, with that being said, guys, smash the like. And if you'd like to support the stream, if you have any questions or comments, please send in a super chat using Streamlabs or Dono Chat. Or if you prefer to use YouTube, YouTube is fine as well. And it is, again, this is a stream on Saint Nicholas. This is the season of giving. And so gift some Kodo Crew memberships. Be greatly appreciative if anybody wanted to gift some memberships to the chat here. Okay. Now, with all that being said, let's get into specifically what I want to talk about. All right. First thing that I want to speak to you guys about is the paganization of Santa Claus. And who is the number one culprit? Well, if you ask me, I would say it's actually Protestantism. So I was in preparation for today because I've done other streams on Santa Claus, but I wanted to think of what is a new angle that I could present to people about Santa Claus, about Saint Nicholas. And we've talked, as I said, about Shaman Claus, about various pagan elements and Odin and Father Christmas and Santa Claus and all this different stuff. But I've never specifically stated who is responsible for the fact that the celebration of Saint Nicholas, a real historic person that is associated with multiple miracles, was impressed. Emperor Constantine, during his lifetime, lived at such an influential period where he lived during the Diocletian persecution. And then after Constantine's Edict of Milan, he spanned both those periods. How did he become this red and white jolly figure riding Santa Clauses in a sled through the night, gifting children presents through the chimney? And honestly, I would argue it's because of Protestantism. It's because of Protestantism. There's a myth that goes around that Christmas is a pagan holiday, right? Christmas is a pagan holiday. Don't you know about Sol Invictus? Well, that's interesting. You bring up Sol Invictus because Sol Invictus, the cult of Sol Invictus, in which they celebrated on December 25th, actually occurred multiple decades after the celebration of Christmas was fully submitted within the Christian world. Essentially, by the 3rd century, Christmas was already fully submitted, especially by the 4th century, which is interesting because Saint Nicholas of Myra, he spans the end of the 3rd century and into the beginning of the 4th century, right? He dies in 343. He's born in 270. So it's very interesting that he exists during this period, but especially once you get to the end of the 4th century, Christmas as a celebration of Christ is fully established. Now, most deriders will say, yeah, but don't you know that December 25th is the winter solstice, right? The light dies, the sun dies for 3 days, and then it moves again on the 25th, and that the Christians were just using the sun as a symbolic appropriation regarding the birth of Christ. And actually, That's not the case. Actually, during that time, December 25th was on the Julian calendar, which today would be January 7th. So the Julian calendar was not exact regarding the solstice and the equinoxes. The Gregorian calendar, the calendar reforms, fully established that, right? And for some of us Orthodox, we are on the Western calendar, the Gregorian calendar. Most of the Slavic churches are on the Julian calendar, the older calendar. And so this calendar issue highlights that no, the Christians did not steal December 25th from the pagans. The Christians calculated from the Annunciation of Christ and March 25th. If you fast forward 9 months, that puts you at December 25th. It had nothing to do with the solstices. Obviously, after the Gregorian reforms and when the celebration of Christmas aligned more directly with the winter solstice, yeah, Christians incorporated the symbolism because it then corresponded with the celebration that they themselves were participating in regarding the nativity. But it didn't go the other way around. And I see this. I even see this from Protestants, right? You don't see it from Catholics as much because, again, not a fan of the papacy, but they are at least historically rooted to a better degree than Protestants. But you get these weird non-denominational Christians that are talking about how Christmas is pagan. We don't put up Christmas tree. What are you talking about? Do you know where any of this stuff comes from? Are you familiar with the traditions during the medieval period? Because what we see today as Santa Claus is a concoction of Protestant Christians reforming the figure of Saint Nicholas because they hated the veneration of saints so much. And so the irony of all this is when you read Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker, you can see how much Saint Nicholas contributed into the destruction of paganism during his time, establishing and paving the way for a truly Christian civilization, a Christian culture, one that was actually endorsed and backed by the Roman Empire. And how ironic that as time moves by after the Reformation, and certainly once you get into the 19th century, the 1800s, Saint Nicholas, who destroyed the pagans, who gave gifts to the children, protected the innocents and the travelers, gets re-paganized. They then begin to develop and add aspects of Odin and aspects of the mythology of the Norse and some of the Northern European states and incorporate that around the figure of Saint Nicholas, but divorcing him from his sainthood. And so how do we get a paganized form of Saint Nicholas? Because of the Protestants. And the irony, because as I always say, Protestantism, it was a project doomed to fail from its inception. And because of it, we now live in a commodified secular celebration of Christmas where you can't even say Merry Christmas anymore. It's Happy Holidays. It's Happy Holidays, guys. No, I'm a Christian supremacist, so I only say Merry Christmas. And anybody who says Happy Holidays, I go out of my way to say Merry Christmas to. And if I see that you have a yarmulke on or your head is wrapped in a turban, I will specifically say Merry Christmas to you as well. So the paganization of Saint Nicholas is really totally at the hands of the Protestants. And I want to walk you through this. And I just want to debunk some of this nonsense that actually comes out of the mouths of Protestants who they themselves, if it wasn't for the Reformation, we would still have a truly Christian Christmas that wasn't then filled with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and all this other stuff. And so Saint Nicholas has moved from the Orthodox bishop, who we're going to be discussing today, to Protestant folklore, and then in the American context with the establishment of New Amsterdam, right? The New Netherlands, which is essentially the state of New York, right? New Amsterdam was part of the Dutch West Indies colony, landed somewhere around Manhattan, and it is essentially the basis and the building of New York City. It is the Dutch that were one of the only Protestant North Christians that held on to the resemblance of anything that was still Saint Nicholas with Santa Claus. And Santa Claus still had a mitre hat, still had sort of bishop regalia on. So there was still the accoutrements of Christianity regarding Saint Nicholas. But once American culture, and that's where in the 19th century, once we get to Washington Irving and Thomas Nast and the development Coca-Cola, all this stuff comes together. By the end of the 1900s, by the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 1900s, the 20th century, we have the fully formed, secular, commodified, toy company, conspiracy amalgamation of modern day Santa Claus. And how much does he represent Christ? How much does the modern secular Santa Claus ever mention Jesus Christ? Of course, he doesn't. And so Christian origins here, theological celebration of the incarnation, fully established by the 4th century, as I highlighted. Saint Nicholas of Myra, who we're going to be focusing on for the rest of this stream. 4th century Orthodox bishop, miracle worker, protector of the poor and children. His feast day is tomorrow, December 6th. So that's one of the reasons, again, major thank you to John for sponsoring the stream. But I wanted to get this stream done today so that people could share this stream on Saint Nicholas tomorrow, which is his feast day. And so at this stage, the tradition is fully Christian. So post Saint Nicholas, during the life of Saint, but it's definitely after the life of Saint Nicholas, from the 4th century onward, Christmas is fully Christian. It actually went out of its way to take away any of the pagan components. In fact, as I said, the fact that the church went out of its way to rid itself of any paganism of the old world. The first major shift. Now, there's kind of elements of some of the myths that get going in the medieval period in Western Europe, but it pretty much maintains itself all the way through the medieval period up into we get to the post-Reformation Northern European period. And so this is who to blame for the secularization of Saint Nicholas. It's the Protestants. Protestant reformers rejected devotion to saints. Saint Nicholas's role in Christmas was suppressed. Protestants discouraged anybody from celebrating Saint Nicholas. And then to fill the gap then, because they didn't want saint veneration, folk cultures reinserted local winter gift givers. In Germany, you got Christkindl, or what we would say is Kris Kringle. In England, you get Father Christmas. In the Low Countries, the Netherlands, you get Santa Claus. So you see how Kris Kringle, Santa Claus, Saint Nick, how they're all coming together as identifiers of the same figure. Santa Claus, a key transitional figure, still based on Saint Nicholas, bishop's robes, mitre hat, arrived by ship from Spain, visited children, judged behavior, accompanied by helpers based on local folklore. This is the moment folk motifs began blending with a Christian saint in the Protestant sphere. Now you get to the American reinvention, New York's literary class. Dutch immigrants brought Santa Claus to New Amsterdam. American writers then reimagined him into a cultural mascot. Washington Irving in 1809, in A History of New York, he transformed Santa Claus into a humorous, pipe-smoking Dutch figure riding in a flying wagon. First appearance of a magical gift bringer disconnected from the liturgical context of the whole thing. So it's a shift from bishop to folkloric jolly gift giver. And then we have Clement Clark Moore in 1823. He wrote the famous poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas, a visit from St. Nicholas." He introduced the concept of reindeers, the chimney as the delivery system, Christmas Eve as the primary focus on the gift giving, and cheerful elfin character, not a bishop. St. Nicholas now leaves Christian history behind and becomes a mythic fantasy figure. And this just gets reinforced about 30 years later by Thomas Nast, political cartoonist who drew Santa for Harper's Weekly, standardized Santa's North Pole residence, toy workshop, ledger of naughty and nice, rotund body, white beard, fur-lined clothing. a fully secular northern myth rooted in the Victorian imagination. So some of these early depictions that Thomas Nast put forth really tintillated the Victorian mind, and they love the aesthetic. They love the imagery of this new Santa Claus that, again, wasn't tainted by the history of Christianity and all this other stuff. It was a new sort of cultural myth, and the Victorian imagination absolutely ate it up. But notice, no theological role remains for who Saint Nicholas, Santa Claus, Kris Kringle is. And then, of course, the final stage is the commercialization of Santa Claus. Coca-Cola and 20th century advertising. You get Haddon Sundblom's. We've talked about him in a previous stream, I think last year. In 1931 onward, he consolidated the red suit from the bishop's vestments via Nast's art. Warm, jovial, universal Santa image became the global commercial mascot for consumer Christmas. And the saint's legacy is absorbed into brand marketing and seasonal consumption from that point forward. And so, you know, one of the things that I wanted to also address is this idea that Santa Claus was actually a shaman. And I am embarrassed to say at one point, I actually believe this to be the case. I remember probably roughly, 2016, still deeply engrossed into the New Age, a psychonaut, believing psychedelics were like the leading edge of religious experience. Heard Terence McKenna talk about how Santa Claus is actually an origin tied with Siberian shamanism. And I thought, what? I've never heard this before. And his argument then goes on to elaborate that he believed, because there is evidence of a variety, not, again, it's not all, but there are some Siberian communities that engage in Amanita muscaria mushroom use. Amanita muscaria being the red and white mushroom. You know, if anybody played Super Mario, know who Toad is. You know, the red and white mushroom is sort of iconic, and if you don't dry it, it can actually kill you. And so Terence McKenna put forth this idea that is very popular today still, that Santa Claus is actually not Christian at all. There, you know, he argued that, yeah, Saint Nicholas really has nothing to do with modern Santa Claus. What modern Santa Claus is the repackaging of ancient shamanism. The idea here is that these Amanita muscaria cults, they would find the Amanita muscaria mushroom. And where did you find those at? You would find them under coniferous trees. Okay, so then there's the Christmas tree. This is for Terence McKenna. What do you do with the mushrooms once you find them? You put them on the tree in the sun so they can dry so you can consume them. This is what he argued is the origin of the ornaments on Christmas trees. Then he talks about how reindeer, which is a fact, are one of the few animal species which is known to eat Amanita muscaria mushrooms, and that Siberian shamans would drink the urine of these reindeers because it has already been filtered of toxins through the reindeer, that it's actually less toxic and that they can get more high without the toxins by drinking reindeer urine. And so he's arguing this is the origin of the flying reindeers, that elves are part of the DMT experience, right? When you get into altered psychonautic space, you encounter these little entities. He's arguing, well, actually what these entities are elves that are part of this Amanita muscaria experience. And that Christmas then is the rebirth ceremony connected to mushroom ecstasy. And that the Christmas tree is Yggdrasil. For those of you familiar, like the cosmic world tree, the axis, the axis mundi, the pillar that unites both Middle Earth with the heavens and with the lower world, right? This is something that shamanism always talked about, is the universal tree. Well, I wanted to also completely debunk this while we're at it right now, because there's actually no evidence for this at all. It's a very compelling narrative. The symbols are very compelling. But if you actually dive into this stuff, it's totally anachronistic. Like, it doesn't line up chronologically, because the whole tradition is established by Christians in the Mediterranean who have no connection to Siberian shamanism, who have no connection to reindeer or Amanita muscaria mushrooms. And so all this stuff is sort of a later repackaging or a reinterpretation of that Americanized secular Christmas myth of modern day Santa Claus. And so I just want to show you guys how this stuff is actually fallacious, and you don't even need to worry about it. But once you see it, you'd be like, oh, okay, I see why he did that, but that didn't make any sense. So, for example, there is no evidence Santa originated from any sort of Siberian myth. He argued, well, Santa's from the North Pole. It makes sense then Santa's actually from Siberian myth. There's actually no evidence. Again, he's derived from Saint Nicholas in Asia Minor. His cult spread from Byzantium to Italy to Western Europe. Siberian shamans had zero contact with early Christian feast development. There is no historical bridge between the Marian bishop of Saint Nicholas and Siberian mushroom rituals. Second, Amanita muscaria was not associated with Christmas in Christian Europe. Mushroom shamanism is documented only in northern Siberian tribes. Saint Nicholas devotion flourished first in the Mediterranean Christian societies where Amanita does not even grow predominantly. So there's no cultural transmission. McKenna actually reverses what I argue. He's reversing the timeline. Christmas is fully attested to by 336 AD in Rome. St. Nicholas, already the gift giver, fully established by the 6th century. Santa Claus mythology fully developed in the 19th and 20th centuries, as we've already talked about, the paganization done by Protestants. Meanwhile, for Terence McKenna, the first academic mention of Syrian mushroom practices isn't until the 17th century, the 18th centuries. And McKenna's hypothesis is really a late 20th century invention. You cannot use modern anthropological observation to invent an ancient origin. It doesn't exist. What about the flying reindeer? It's because they're high on mushrooms, right? Actually, the first appearance of flying reindeer doesn't even occur until 1823 in a visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas. No medieval European artwork ever depicts Santa with reindeer. So clearly, that's not the origins and the way that it was celebrated at all. Reindeer do eat Amanita, but the fact was unknown when the myth was created. What about the red and white suit? He argues it's a mushroom symbol. Well, one, and I remember in lectures that he would give, he would say, it has nothing to do with Christianity. Does he even know what the color of the vestments are during the nativity? It's red for many of our jurisdictions, but if not, it's white. The vestments are white. So the vestments in the Christian church when celebrating Christmas is either red or white. Maybe that's where the colors come from. Again, derived from the bishop's red vestments, later standardized by Thomas Nast and Coca-Cola advertising. But just because there's similar colors, it's a coincidence, not a genealogy. And, what the heck happened here? The World Tree, elves, toy workshop are Victorian folklore. Elves appear due to the 19th century European fairy tales. The tree does not equal cosmic shamanism and so on and so forth. And so just to put the nail in the coffin of anybody trying to argue that Christmas is a pagan holiday, I want to tell you, why do we celebrate on December 25th? It was chosen before the solstice mismatch existed. So when Christians identified December 25th as the date for the nativity in the 2nd to 3rd centuries, they were using the Roman civil calendar of that time, what we now call the Julian calendar. Okay. And so in the Julian calendar of the early church, December 25th was 9 months after the Annunciation. I probably should spell that right. The feast was tied to the theological symbolism of the incarnation, not the astrological or astronomical position of the sun as pagans understood it. So key theological reasoning behind December 25th, as we already said, it has to do with 9 months after the point in which Christ was conceived. And so this logic predates any Sol Invictus connection, because Sol Invictus, the cult of Sol Invictus, comes decades after the establishment of Christmas at the date of December 25th. The date began as a symbol of salvation history, not seasonal mythology regarding the movement of the sun. This just talks about a little bit of the calendar differences, but Was the solstice the real reason for why Christians chose December 25th? No. Now, we did later embrace the symbolism, but my point with the different calendars is that the Julian calendar, December 25th, does not line up exactly on the winter solstice. That was later corrected in the Gregorian calendar. Now, I'm not arguing which one's better or not, but I'm just saying, so even the idea when people say, well, do you know Christians, they celebrate Christ's birth on December 25th because Christ is the sun. He's the sun. He's the sun in the sky. And it dies for 3 days and then it moves up one more. It's reborn. And that's why they do. You do know, right, that on the Julian calendar, December 25th didn't line up exactly with the winter solstice. So that really had nothing to do with it. But they did incorporate it. Once the Gregorian calendar came out and they fixed it and it did align with the winter solstice. Yeah, Christ as the true light entering the dark world. There's a lot of symbolism that can be gleaned from that. This is what I call baptized symbolism, not pagan inheritance. So who copied who exactly? Here's the historical sequence. Christians identify March 25th, 9 months later, December 25th. That is fully established by the years 20 to 250 AD. Rome celebrates nativity liturgically 336 AD. Aurelian promotes Sol Invictus on December 25th, 274 AD. So at least 2 decades at the latest date in which Christians had already identified the date for Christmas. So it overlaps, but Christian calculations are older, and the solstice alignment was secondary theological sizzle, not a borrowed pagan foundation. Pagan festivals borrowed from Christians, actually, not the other way around. So when Emperor Aurelian established Sol Invictus on December 25th, he was doing so because he wanted to slow down and co-opt Christian symbolism to resist Christian growth. Christianity did not adopt the pagan feast. Paganism adopted the Christian feast to fight its expansion. Don't you know that Mithras is just like Jesus? Really? Yeah, Mithras he was born on December 25th. What? In the Roman cult, Mithras' birth was not a theme. There is no ancient text referring to Mithras' birth on December 25th. Mithras emerges from a rock, not from a mother. Mithraic worship focused on initiation rites, meal sacrifice symbolism, cosmic imagery, bull slaying. No birth celebration on December 25th. Zero connection. What about other claims? Certain neo-pagan and internet sources cite Attis, Horus, and Osiris, Dionysius, Tammuz, Adonis. But these claims are anachronistic and unsupported by ancient sources. For example, Dionysius has festivals throughout the year, none specifically on December 25th. Horus had no set birthday tied to a solstice date. Adonis feasts were in spring, connected to vegetation myths. Saturnalia, often wrongly connected to Christmas, ended on December 23rd. None of these gods have a birth on December 25th in antiquity. So why has this myth persisted? Well, 18th through 20th century anti-Christian polemicists began claiming Christians stole December 25th from pagans. But rigorous modern scholarship has actually reversed this claim. Christians already celebrated December 25th for biblical theological reasons, and later pagans and folkloric writers retroactively tried to draw connections. So when anybody wants to tell you Christmas is a pagan holiday, tell them, no, it's not a pagan holiday. The only thing pagan about Christmas is what the Protestants did due to their rejection of saint veneration, and then allowing for a new amalgamation of Saint Nicholas with basically Northern European folklores and myths to create some type of figure that would allow them to still have a winter gift giver without ever saying the name Saint Nicholas. That's how we get it. And so if it wasn't for the Protestants, we wouldn't have a repaganization of Christmas. If anything, Christmas is the emancipation of Christianity from the ancient pagan world. But now Christmas, if you look at it today with the happy holidays and the consumerism and the secularism, I would argue and the modern myth of Santa Claus, it's because Protestants and the Protestant Reformation, Santa Claus has been repaganized. And what we need to do as Orthodox Christians is re-Christianize Santa Claus. So that is my argument for there. I just wanted to put that together because we're going to see that. You're going to see videos going viral of some non-dom Protestant saying, guys, I don't think we should be celebrating Christmas. I don't put a Christmas tree in my house. I'm not an idol worshiper. Dude, shut up. Shut up. You don't even know what you're talking about. So anyway, smash that like, guys. With that, now we're going to be diving into this wonderful book. Again, get your copy. A link is in the video description for anybody who's interested. Get your copy. It's not an expensive book, guys. It's like $15. $15. This is something that you can read with your children literally every Christmas time. So where I want to begin then is we're going to be moving through essentially the life of Saint Nicholas now. And I'm going to be reading from sections from this book. I'm not going to read the whole book to you, but I've put together a timeline based on this book. You can see. And I just want to move through the timeline. I have bullet points where I think that are really interesting in each section. And I have these tabs that you can see in the book to sort of highlight where exactly I should stop and read. So to begin, St. Nicholas, as we talked about, he already had a sort of special and peculiar birth. Our beloved saint, St. Nicholas, loved prayer, reading, learning, and scripture at a very early age. And because of this, he was already kind of set apart. While other kids were about, going to the marketplace and getting into the chaos of the city, St. Nicholas, on the other hand, was very contemplative, very devout, interested in Christ and growing his faith and growing his knowledge. That right there kind of set him apart as a very young age. As I highlighted, he was named after his uncle, Bishop Nicholas. And Bishop Nicholas saw in the young man that he was going to be destined for something special. And so I wanted to mention here, let me skip forward, that so birth of a saint. And so I want to read a section describing this point in his life when he was set apart in a conversation he had with Bishop Nicholas of Patara, which is his uncle. And so this is John's writing. So we're going to move through here. And just so you can get a feel for John's writing and how kind of cinematic he makes the life of St. Nicholas. This is why I said somebody needs to animate this. Somebody needs to make a great Orthodox animation of this. And so it reads, while his peers were drawn to the lively distractions of the marketplace and the lure of adventure upon the sea, Nicholas felt the inexorable pull towards something deeper, something unseen, yet more real to him than the shifting sands of the shore. In the stillness of the church, he felt it most keenly, an unspoken promise whispering to him from the darkened alcoves and shadowed corners. He was not meant for ordinary life. His uncle, Bishop Nicholas of Patara, had seen it too. One evening, as young Nicholas pored over the sacred text by the flickering light of a tallow candle, the bishop approached him. His face, lined with wisdom and years of service, bore an expression of quiet gravity. Quote, "You are not like the others," the elder said, placing a firm but gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "The Lord has set you apart, Nicholas. Have you felt it?" Nicholas hesitated, his heartbeat quickening. He felt it. He had noted it in the depth of his soul, but to hear it spoken aloud was both exhilarating and terrifying. "Yes," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Quote, "But I do not understand it." The bishop smiled, though his eyes were heavy with the weight of foreknowledge. Quote, "You will. When the time comes, you must not hesitate." The time came sooner than he imagined. And so the book then goes into how the city of Lycia, where he is from, was experiencing essentially a plague. A plague was going around. Everybody was getting sick. People were trying to avoid each other. And it was here that, unfortunately, Saint Nicholas's father, Theophanes, he contracted whatever was going around at this point. And so here is a little tidbit of this section. It said it began with a fever. Theophanes, once a strong and noble man, collapsed at his writing desk. His breath labored, his skin clammy. Nicholas rushed to his side, his heart hammering against his ribs as he helped his father to bed. He prayed without ceasing, pleading with God to spare him, to lift the affliction from their home. For 7 days, Theophanes suffered. Nona, which is St. Nicholas's mother, never left his side, her hands cool against his burning skin, her voice whispering lullabies from Nicholas's childhood. But on the 7th day, as the dawn painted the sky in hues of crimson and gold, Theophanes exhaled his final breath. Nicholas felt the world tilt beneath him. His mother did not last the week. The grief was unbearable, an all-consuming storm that swallowed him whole. He buried both his parents with his own hands, the soil damp beneath his fingers, the stones rough against his palms. The cemetery was silent, save for the distant crash of waves against the cliffs. No mourners came. The city had lost too many already. As the last handful of earth fell upon his father's grave, a sob tore from Nicholas's throat. Raw and unbidden, he fell to his knees, pressing his forehead against the cold ground. Night fell, and still he remained there, his body curled against the earth, the weight of his sorrow pressing him into the dust. It was there in the darkness that he made his choice. And so the next little section here, we're going to start getting into his first miracles. So as we've talked about, you guys have heard, everybody's heard, well, at least every Christian should know about Saint Nicholas and the gold coins and the three daughters of Callictus. And so I want to read John's portraying of this story to you guys right now. So, and guys, if you would like to support my work, please send in a super chat, be it on Streamlabs, Dono Chat, or YouTube. Looks like $10 came in over on the Dono Chat. Paris Alexandru throws in 10. Thank you very much. He says, DPH, are you aware that Greek Orthodox venerate Saint Basil the Great on the 1st of January instead of Santa Claus since the 4th century? Can you comment on this? What? Paris, I don't know what does that have to do with anything? The 1st of January instead of Santa Claus. I don't know. I don't exactly know what to make of that. December 25th is Christmas, whether it be on Julian or Gregorian. Julian calendar, December 25th is our January 7th. December 6th is the feast day of Saint Nicholas. December 6th is the day in which typically the gift giving would occur. The focus on Christmas Eve is part of the development of the modern Santa Claus. So venerating Saint Basil the Great on the 1st of January, I'm not really sure what that has to do with Santa Claus. Maybe I'm misunderstanding something, Paris. I'm not sure what you're asking, brother. I do appreciate the support, though. Thank you very much. Okay. So this is John's portrayal of the three daughters of Callictus. Nicholas, now a young man, had heard of the whispers of Callictus's plight. Here, let me my wife has the heat on. I have to open this window. I'm going to burn up. Whew. Man, women kill me with the heat. She gets the house so dang hot. All right. Do you guys deal with this too? Or are your wives constantly cold? No matter if the house is, 74 degrees, they're cold. I think it's just a woman thing. All right, let's get back to where we're at. A secret act of mercy. Nicholas, now a young man, had heard of the whispers of Callictus's plight. The people of Patera spoke of it in hushed tones, averting their eyes, ashamed that none among them could offer help. The thought of a father forced to barter the innocence of his daughters for survival sent a fire through Nicholas's veins. That night, as the town lay wrapped in restless sleep, Nicholas moved unseen through the winding streets. The moon hung high above, the pale glow casting silver streaks across the rooftops, turning the cobbled roads into rivers of shadow. In his mind, he carried a small leather pouch, its weight not much in gold, but it was great in significance. He reached the modest home of Callictus and pressed himself against the outer wall. Through a narrow gap in the wooden shutters, he could see inside. The fire had burned low, its embers pulsing faintly in the darkness. The merchant's daughters had fallen into fitful slumber, curled against each other like fragile birds seeking warmth. Across the room, Callictus sat motionless at the table, his head buried in his hands. Even in sleep, his face was etched with sorrow. Nicholas took a breath, whispered a prayer, and reached up. With a swift motion, he tossed the pouch through the window. The soft thud of gold hitting the wooden floor was quiet, yet in the stillness of night, it rang out like the toll of a bell. Callictus stirred. His breath hitched. He straightened eyes darting across the darkened room until he spotted the small bundle at his feet. His hands trembled as he reached for it, fingers loosening the drawstring. A gasp escaped his lips as gold coins spilled into the palm, their warm gleam catching the weak glow of the firelight. His breath came in ragged gasps, disbelief warring with hope. His hands clenched around the gold as he lifted his gaze toward the heavens, and for the first time in months, his whispered prayers were not of despair, but of gratitude. Morning broke over Patera with a golden light illuminating the narrow streets and the great white columns of the temple standing in silent tribute to the gods of old. But Callictus had little concern for such things now. With the newfound gold, he wasted no time securing a suitor for his eldest daughter. That very day, arrangements were made for an honorable marriage. The home that had once been filled with sorrow now rang with laughter and relief. And yet on the following night, as the city slumbered, another pouch of gold fell through his window. The moment the weight of the coins landed upon the floor, Callictus fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. A second daughter was saved. But now he could no longer bear the mystery. Who was this unseen benefactor? What kind soul had intervened so quietly, so humbly, asking for nothing in return? By the third night, Callictus resolved to uncover the truth. He did not sleep. Instead, he hid himself in the shadows of his home, his heartbeat pounding in his ears as he waited. The house was still. His daughters slept soundly, unaware of their father's quiet vigil. The air was quiet with expectation, the silence pressing against his skin like a second layer. Then a movement. A dark figure emerged from the alleyway, stepping lightly over the threshold of moonlight. Callictus held his breath, his pulse hammering as he watched the figure draw close, arm extended toward the window, a third pouch of gold clasped in his fingers. With a burst of movement, Callictus lunged forward, grasping the figure's cloak before he could vanish into the night. The man turned, and in the pale glow of the rising moon, Nicholas's face was revealed. Callictus inhaled sharply, his voice trembling as he whispered, "Why?" Nicholas did not resist. He simply smiled, his gaze filled with the quiet kindness that had always burned within him. "Because Christ has given me much," he said gently, "and I must give in return." The word struck Callictus with the force of a hammer. His knees gave out and he collapsed into the cold stone, his hand clutching as Nicholas's robes. "How can I ever repay you?" Nicholas shook his head, gently prying the merchant's fingers from his cloak. Quote, "Do not try to repay me," he said. "Give thanks to God, and when you are able, do the same for another." Tears streaked down Callictus's weathered face as he pressed his forehead to the ground in gratitude. But when he lifted his gaze once more, Nicholas was gone, swallowed by the night, as silent and swift as the mercy he had delivered. So I thought that was a beautiful retelling of the story of the three daughters in Callictus. with Saint Nicholas. So that is, again, pages like 26 through 28 in the book here. And then here is the call to greater sacrifice. Here is the next section. The saint of silent gift. This is him exercising. This is him fixing a withered hand of a woman. So this is another miracle. I was not aware of this miracle, but again, we're going to read about it. Did you guys know that there is a miracle from Saint Nicholas in which he healed the withered hand of a woman in the marketplace? And so here it is. One morning, as he made his way to his teacher, he noticed a woman standing off the path, struggling to carry a small bundle. Her right hand was withered, twisted against her body, the fingers curled like a gnarled roots of an old tree. With every movement, pain flickered across her face, yet she pressed on, refusing to let her affliction stop her. Nicholas slowed his steps. She wasn't begging. She wasn't calling for help, but she didn't need to. He could see the burden she carried, the weight of years spent trying to do simple things, the quiet suffering that had become her way of life. He approached her gently. Quote, "May I help you?" he asked. She looked up, startled, her eyes filled with the weary hesitation of someone who had long since stopped expecting miracles. Quote, "This is how God made me," she said, shifting the bundle to her good arm. Nicholas shook his head. "No," he said softly, "this is not how God made you." He reached out and placed his hand over her withered one. His fingers were warm, steady, full of quiet certainty. He prayed, his words simple but filled with the unshakable faith that had burned within him since childhood. Then slowly he traced the sign of the cross over her arm. A tremor ran through her fingers. She gasped as feeling rushed back into her hand, the stiffness melting away like ice under the morning sun. Before her eyes, her fingers stretched out, whole and unblemished, as though they had never been anything but strong. The bundle she had been struggling to hold dropped to the ground as she lifted both hands before her face, barely daring to believe. Tears welled in her eyes. Her lips trembled with words she couldn't quite form. Nicholas smiled. Quote, "Give thanks to God," he said. Then, without waiting for praise or recognition, he turned and continued on his way, disappearing down the road toward his lessons, leaving behind only wonder in his wake. The woman, overcome with gratitude, fell to her knees, her once withered hands lifted toward heaven in prayer. The news of the miracle spread quickly, another testament to the holiness that surrounded young Nicholas. And then we're going to move to the next one, pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Now, one of these sections I did skip for anybody. We were talking earlier about how Theophanus, the father of Saint Nicholas, wanted a son so that he would inherit his wealth. Theophanus was a wealthy man. He had an estate. He had servants that worked at the estate. And Saint Nicholas grew up in this context. And so imagine a boy growing up in a very well-to-do, wealthy family, choosing to become celibate, choosing, as we'll see on this pilgrimage to Jerusalem, contemplating becoming a monastic. But that was not what God had for him. He had no intention of becoming a bishop at this point. And so he ended up giving, as we said, he ended up giving away almost all the wealth that he had. Or essentially, he did give up all the wealth that he had. I imagine the gold coins that he gave those girls for a dowry were probably part of his inheritance. But he literally gave away the estate. He told the poor that they could come to his father's house and take whatever they needed. And then eventually he left his family home to never return again, essentially. Okay, so pilgrimage to the Holy Land. This is the next section we're going to get into. And in this section, we're going to be seeing the beginning of him stopping a storm, right? How does St. Nicholas get associated with the sea and travelers and making the way for people in tumultuous environments like a sea storm? Well, we're about to find out. And then eventually he arrives to Jerusalem, a place in which he desired deeply to go on a pilgrimage. And he finds himself at a monastery contemplating, am I going to become a monastic? Should I devote my life to Christ? Should I just stay right here and never leave again? And then at night, Christ came to him and basically told him that you need to return to your people, Nicholas. You are to be the shepherd of my flock. And from that night, the next day, he began to make his way back to Anatolia. So let me read a little bit about this. So here's the first storm at sea with Saint Nicholas. So it talks about how he found his way onto a ship of a bunch of merchants. They told him, hey, the sea can be pretty rough for the devout. I see that you're kind of a pious man. It gets pretty crazy out here. And he reassured them, no, this is where I'm going. I want to go to Jerusalem. I'm trying to go to Jerusalem. And they eventually then they set sea, and here it picks up. And it was peaceful, it was beautiful for the first 4 days, but the peace did not last. On the fourth night, as darkness settled over the waters, a distant rumble echoed across the horizon. The crew grew tense, their eyes shifting uneasily toward the west, where thick clouds had begun to gather. Quote, the winds are changing, one of the sailors muttered, gripping the railing as the first gust sent a shiver through the rigging. Nicholas remained still, watching as the heavens began to churn. Within moments, the storm struck with the force of a hammer. The sky blackened, lightning tearing jagged scars through the darkness. The wind howled like a living beast, tearing at the sails, sending torrents of rain lashing across the deck. The waves rose into monstrous peaks, crashing against the hull with merciless fury. The ship lurched violently, sending men sprawling. Nicholas gripped a nearby rope as water surged across the deck, soaking his cloak, the air thick with the scent of salt and fear. A sudden crack split the air. The mast groaned, its wood shuddering under the strain. Hold fast, the captain roared, his voice barely audible under the deafening wind. Secure the lines! Nicholas turned just in time to see one of the sailors thrown across the deck by the force of a wave. The man landed hard, his body crumpling like a broken doll. Without hesitation, Nicholas rushed forward to kneel beside the fallen man. The sailor's chest barely rose and fell, his face pale beneath the flickering lantern light. The crew gathered around, their expressions dark with dread. We are lost, one of them whispered. The storm will take us all. Nicholas ignored the fear in their voices. He pressed a hand to the injured sailor's chest and closed his eyes. Lord, he prayed, his voice steady despite the chaos. You who calmed the storms upon the Galilean Sea, have mercy upon your servants. Let your peace fall upon these waters. A sudden stillness swept over the ship. The wind softened to a whisper. The towering waves lost their fury, sinking into the gentle swells. The clouds, once a withering mass of darkness, began to break apart, revealing a pale glow of the moon. The sailor stood in stunned silence. The injured man stirred, his eyelids fluttering open as if gasped for breath. Nicholas helped him sit up, offering a reassuring smile. Knowing glances and whispered prayers passed through the crew. They no longer looked at Nicholas as a mere traveler. They saw something else, something they did not yet have words for. From that moment on, they no longer called him simply Nicholas. They called him the man of God. And so the rest of the chapter then goes into his going to Jerusalem, seeing the walls of Jerusalem, And then that night, one of the nights, not that night, but a night during this pilgrimage at a monastery where St. Nicholas is contemplating whether he should become a monastic or not, he says this. Well, he hears this, rather. Christ appears to him. He had considered staying there, devoting his life to monastic silence in the land hallowed by Christ himself. But as he prayed, a presence filled the room. A voice, deep and commanding, yet filled with peace, spoke. Return to your people, Nicholas. He opened his eyes, his breath shallow. The flickering glow of an oil lamp cast shadows across the walls, but the room was not empty. A figure stood before him, luminous, yet veiled in shadow. There is work to be done. Return, and you shall shepherd my flock. Nicholas bowed his head, his soul trembling. His journey was not meant to end here. It was only beginning. When dawn broke, he gathered his belongings and took one last lingering look at the sacred city of Jerusalem. And then with steady steps, he turned toward home. And so now he's returning home. Okay, so Saint Nicholas is not yet Bishop of Myra yet. What's getting ready to happen now is he's about to assume that mantle. And he didn't willingly choose to. It was given to him, as we're about to find out. So then he travels again back from the Holy Land. So he pilgrimages from Lycia to the Holy Land, and now he's going back home. Okay. And he finds when he gets back that the Church of Myra stood at the heart of the city, and its bishop had just reposed, an old man. And nobody really knew what to do. Everybody was somber. They were reflecting and giving their eulogies of the past bishop. And they didn't know what to choose or who to choose. They thought maybe we should go with a more educated, more erudite theological bishop. Others said maybe we should go with a more prayerful bishop. And the eldest bishop, after they contemplated, they really couldn't come to a consensus on who should be Bishop of Myra. It reads as this: the eldest bishop remained alone in the sanctuary, his head bowed in exhaustion. When sleep stole over him like a veil, his breathing slowed, yet a soft, unmistakable voice spoke into the stillness. Rise. His eyes fluttered open, but the room was empty. The voice did not come from flesh, but from spirit. It said, go to the doors of the church before the first light of dawn. The voice commanded, gentle yet yielding. The first man who enters shall be Myra's bishop. And so, what do we find? The final moments before dawn were shrouded in cold and quiet. Nicholas walked alone, his cloak drawn tightly around him, his breath forming faint clouds in the crisp air. He had spent the night in prayer, seeking clarity, seeking peace. Myra was a city in need, not only of food and shelter, but of justice, of mercy, of the presence of God among them. Then the church bell tolled, the first call for morning prayer. Without thinking, Nicholas turned his steps toward the sanctuary. The doors of the church loomed before him, framed by pillars worn smooth with time. He reached out, pressing his hand against the ancient wood, and pushed them open. The scent of incense greeted him, thick and fragrant. The golden light of oil lamps flickered against the mosaics, casting a warm glow upon the waiting elders. They turned at the sound of his entrance, their eyes widening as if they beheld something beyond the mortal. At the center of them all, the eldest bishop stepped forward, his expression unreadable. He studied Nicholas for a long moment, then spoke, "What is your name, my son?" Nicholas hesitated, then bowed his head. "I am Nicholas, a servant of Christ." A hush fell over the council. The elder nodded, his voice unshaken, his words carrying the weight of divine certainty. "You are the one." Now, Nicholas wasn't sure that he wanted to be bishop. There's a lot to go with that. And there's a lot of burden for someone to take to be the bishop, especially during that period. Remember, this is before Constantine. This is before the Edict of Milan. This is what we're getting ready to get into, is the Diocletian persecution of Christians. And so the people rejoiced. Hymns of thanksgiving rose in the streets, the bells of church pealing with joyous resonance. From the wealthiest merchants to the poorest beggars, the citizens of Myra gathered to witness the moment, eager to touch his cloak, to receive the new bishop's blessing. But Nicholas did not rejoice. He had not come seeking authority. He had not come to lead, only to serve. The weight of such a calling was too great, too vast, too scared for a man to bear. Or too sacred, for a man to bear. And so he fled. He fled to the outer hills of the city. And he sat and he prayed. And when the sun rose over Myra, Nicholas returned to the church. He stood before the people, his hands trembling and his heart resolute. Quote, "If it is God's will," he said softly, "then I will obey." And so in the presence of priests and elders, with the prayers of the people rising like incense to the heavens, Nicholas was consecrated as the Bishop of Myra. From that day forward, he became the father to the people. He fed the hungry with his own hands, distributing grain from the storehouses to those who had none. He sheltered the orphan, giving them a place of refuge within the church walls. He comforted the grieving, healed the sick, and defended the innocent from injustice. He walked among the poor, the widows, the forsaken. He did not rule from a throne, but from the streets where the people lived and suffered. And in all things, he remained a servant and a man of prayer. The air was thick with dust and pungent scent of burning oil as Bishop Nicholas made his way through the anxious crowd. Villagers whispered in hushed tones, clutching their prayer ropes and crossing themselves. All eyes were fixed on the wretched figure before them, a man writhing, his body twisting in unnatural contortions, his mouth gaped open in a silent scream, his eyes rolling back, revealing only the whites. His family had pleaded for help, desperate for after every physician and healer had failed. But this was no ordinary illness. The people of the village had seen it too many times before. This man was possessed. Bishop Nicholas stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. He perceived more than a mere affliction. He saw the evil presence within, coiling like a serpent, defiling the man's soul. He exhaled, his breath steady, as he reached for the book of the Gospels with the left hand. The light of the setting sun caught the golden embroidery of the bishop's sash, casting a fleeting shimmer across his vestments. The possessed man let out a low, guttural growl, inhuman, unnatural. A shudder passed through the crowd. Some gasped. Others instinctively stepped back, clutching their crosses. Mothers pulled their children behind them. The villagers knew the truth. This was no sickness of the body, but a demon raging against the light. Nicholas traced the sign of the cross in the air with slow, deliberate precision. The man thrashed, his body buckling under the unforeseen force. A guttural, strangled cry escaped his lips, raw with fury and suffering. The air itself seemed so tightened around them, suffocating and thick with malice. Some villagers averted their eyes, trembling, while others fell to their knees, whispering prayers to God. "In the name of Jesus Christ, be gone!" Nicholas' voice rang out, steady and commanding, the authority of heaven thundering through his words. A shriek pierced the evening stillness, a sound so unearthly that even the bravest among them recoiled. The man's body convulsed one final time before he collapsed to the ground like a lifeless heap. The oppressive weight in the air lifted in an instant. A sudden gust of wind swept through the village square, rustling garments and stirring the dust beneath their feet. The man inhaled sharply, his chest heaving. Slowly, he pushed himself upright, his limbs no longer contorted, his face no longer twisted in agony. His eyes, once dark and vacant, now shone with clarity. A long moment of silence stretched across the crowd. Then, as if a floodgate had broken, the villagers erupted. Some fell to the ground in praise, others wept openly. A woman clutched her child, whispering prayers of gratitude. An old man, his hands trembling, crossed himself repeatedly, tears streaming down his weathered face. But there were also those who stood frozen, their expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. Could it truly be? Had they just witnessed the power of God manifest before them? The freed man turned to Nicholas, his lips parting as if to speak, but words failed him. Nicholas simply nodded, his expression calm, as if what just transpired was no more extraordinary than the rising of the sun. It was not the first time Nicholas had cast out demons, and it would not be the last. Many more would come. Men, women, even children, dragged forth in desperation, their bodies tormented by forces unseen. Each time Nicholas stood before them with the book of the Gospels in his left hand, his right hand raised in blessing, calling upon the name of Christ. And each time the darkness fled. And so the next section, little section, this part of the same chapter, is about him going to places and destroying harbingers of evil. The first one we're going to read is a cypress tree, that there is a village, Placoma, that had a cypress tree that they believed had an ancient god in it. Another story, as we're going to read, is a well in a neighboring city, where they believed that a demon was in the well, and they wouldn't even get water until noon, so that the sun was directly over the well so that they could see down it, because people, when they looked down the well in the shadow, they would see eyes of something. They would see a demon. They would see some type of entity within it. And so the first to call upon him were the villagers of Placoma. They spoke of a great cypress tree, ancient and towering, its gnarled roots twisted deep into the earth. They claimed that shadows moved among its branches at dusk. The strange whispers filled the air when the wind did not blow. Nicholas listened, and then he took up an axe. The people watched, hesitant, as he strode toward the tree. It loomed over him, its dark limbs swaying, though there was no breeze. He raised the axe high, the blade flashing in the sun, and brought it down with a resounding crack against the trunk. A shriek split the air. The villagers staggered back as an invisible force tore free from the tree, a howling, screeching presence that scattered into the sky like smoke before the wind. The tree shuddered, its once menacing form suddenly no more than just wood and leaves. Word spread quickly. In the next village, the people pleaded for Nicholas to rid them of another presence, the one lurking deep within their well. For years, they had drawn water only at midday, when the sun was high and shadows were few. Even then, they did so in haste, avoiding the well's edge, refusing to look into the depths for fear of what might stare back. Nicholas did not hesitate. He approached the well, standing at its stone rim. A terrible stillness filled the air. Then, lifting his right hand in blessing, he traced the sign of the cross and spoke a prayer of exorcism. The earth trembled. He approached the well, standing at its stone rim. A terrible stillness filled the air. Then, lifting his right hand in blessing, he traced the sign of the cross. A screeching wail erupted from the well, rising in a furious gust of wind. The villagers clutched their cloaks as the unseen force fled, spiraling into the sky before vanishing into nothingness. Silence fell. Then slowly the people edged forward, peering into the well. The water below shimmered, still and untroubled for the first time in years. Nicholas turned to them, his expression calm. It is finished. And with that, peace returned to the village. So now the next chapter is the persecution of Saint Nicholas under Diocletian. Again, for those of you who didn't hear the beginning of the stream, it was anywhere between 6 to 10 years he was imprisoned under Diocletian. It's not exactly clear when he was let out. I was trying to find exact dates. Some theorize that after the reign of Diocletian, he was let out. Others claim that it wasn't until Constantine and the battle at the Milvian Bridge in which he then was able to actually free many of these prisoners. So here is now Saint Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, performing miracles, giving gifts to the poor and the needy, living basically at his church. There was a little room with a wooden bed that he would sleep on. And so he's in Myra, and all of a sudden he starts hearing and hears the clamor and sees the stirring of the people, that the Roman soldiers are here. It started in the cities nearest at the heart of the empire. Soldiers descended upon churches like wolves upon sheep, their torches illuminating the night with unholy fire. The statues of Christ were shattered, the scriptures torn into pieces, and faithful dragged from their homes in chains. And then the executions began in the public squares, where once orators had spoken and philosophers had debated. The cries of martyrs now rang out. Men, women, and children alike were stripped of their dignity, beaten, scourged, and forced to deny the name of Christ. Those who refused faced the sword, the flames, or the beast of the arena. Word spread swiftly across the land, carried on the lips of travelers and merchants. Myra was not spared from the horror. Nicholas knew what was coming. One evening, as he knelt in prayer, a young woman burst into the church, her face streaked with tears, her hands trembling as she clutched a bundle of parchment to her chest. "They are coming, Master," her voice breaking. "The soldiers, there is no time. They will burn the church. They will take you." Nicholas did not move. His heart was calm, his spirit unshaken. "Then let them come," he said. The girl's eyes widened. "You must leave. Hide yourself." But Nicholas shook his head. A shepherd does not abandon his flock in the hour of the wolves. The soldiers came before dawn. The doors of the church burst open in sacred silence, shattered by the stomp of boots. The people of Myra had gathered in the sanctuary, their eyes wide with terror as the imperial guard flooded in. Nicholas stood at the altar, his hands folded in prayer. "Are you the one they call the Bishop of Myra?" the centurion demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. Nicholas lifted his gaze. "I am." The soldier sneered. "By decree of the emperor, all those who follow the false god of Christos must renounce their faith or face the punishment of Rome." A ripple of fear passed through the gathered faithful. Some wept. Some clutched their children to their chests. Others fell to their knees in silent defiance. Nicholas did not hesitate. He stepped forward, his voice steady. "I will never renounce my Lord." The centurion's expression darkened. "Then you will suffer." Before anyone could react, the guard seized him, their hands like iron upon his arms. The people cried out, some rushing forward in desperation, only to be met with the flat of swords against their chests. Nicholas stood unmoved, his silence defiant. He would not yield, nor would he betray the faith that he had vowed to protect. He merely turned his face toward heaven as they dragged him from the sanctuary, his lips moving in silent prayer. And so then he's basically put into this small cell, and John talks a little bit about how small it was and the stench of it. You can imagine he was chained. And like I said, he was there for 6 to 10 years. We don't know exactly. And then eventually the fall of Diocletian. And so the next chapter is the triumph of Constantine. And so here comes General Constantine. And so the way that John presents it is that he is kind of siding with the theory that Saint Nicholas was actually released after the death of Diocletian. There are some, again, I was looking into, there's multiple arguments. Some believe that he was there for 10 years. We don't know fully, but I want to read you this last section by John talking about the fall of Diocletian. And then one fateful day, the iron doors of the prison cracked open. Nicholas, gaunt and frail but unbroken, was dragged before a new official, one bearing the insignia of an imperial decree. "The emperor is dead," the man announced. "Diocletian is no more. The persecution has ended. You are free." A hush fell over the gathered prisoners. Some wept in disbelief. Others merely stared, too broken to understand. Nicholas bowed his head, not in relief, not in exhaustion, but in gratitude. The Lord had been faithful, and his work was not yet done. With slow, measured steps, Nicholas walked out of the prison, the sun blinding after so many years in the dark. The city of Myra awaited him, and beyond it, the world. And so now St. Nicholas is out of prison. He's returning back to Myra. And the rise of Constantine. In the year of 312, Constantine set his eyes upon Rome. It was the beating heart of the world, the center of all power, but it lay in the hands of Maxentius, a tyrant who wielded cruelty as his greatest weapon. The people of the eternal city suffered beneath his rule, bound by taxes, oppression, and the merciless whims of a ruler unfit for the throne. Constantine knew that to claim Rome was to claim the future. but the odds were against him. His army was strong, but outnumbered. Maxentius commanded legions twice the size of Constantine's, fortified behind the towering walls of Rome, protected by the old gods of their ancestors. Victory seemed impossible until the night the heavens opened. And so then it talks about the Chi Rho and Christ telling St. Constantine under this symbol. Let me see the exact quote. By this sign you shall conquer. That is the famous quote. So everybody knows that then he wins at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. And then he issues the Edict of Milan, essentially legalizing Christianity for the first time. And then what's next? The Council of Nicaea. For anybody who just joined, we are going over this book, Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker, The Real Story of Santa Claus by Robert John Hammond. I have been advocating, if you are Orthodox Christian and you have children, get this book. Make this book a yearly Christmas read. I promise you it's worth it. And so the Council of Nicaea, what we're going to see is that St. Constantine is summoned by, St. Nicholas is summoned by Emperor St. Constantine for the council. That we're going to hear about St. Athanasius, right, defending the divinity and the true Christology of Christ against the heresies of Arius. I'm going to skip some of that, but then we'll see that St. Nicholas ends up slapping Arius, the famous slap, that everybody, it's the basis of today's thumbnail, literally slaps the face of Arius to the chagrin and to the shock of everyone there. As I said, you are not allowed to be violent in the presence of the emperor. And St. Constantine was there presiding over the council. And so St. Nicholas then is brought before Constantine, and he says, well, I should throw you in jail, but I'm going to let the bishops decide what to do. And they do arrest St. Nicholas. And then he spends at least, somewhere, again, the Council of Nicaea, as I said, a rough estimate is about 2 months. I saw one very specific date, which was 2 months and 12 days. Maybe that is exactly how long the Council of Nicaea was. But at some point, he's arrested and he is in jail for the entirety of the rest of the Council of Nicaea. Okay. So, anyways, Saint Nicholas goes to the council. The council begins. Athanasius is defending the true Christology of Christ. And then we get to Saint Nicholas strikes Arius. As Arius vigorously continued, and for those who don't know, Arius was the bishop of Alexandria, and he believed in a Christology in which Jesus Christ was not divine. He did not share of the essence with the Father. He was a fully illuminated man, but he was a fully created entity. He shared no eternal divinity other than a sort of human participation, which we all can have. And so if that is the case, then theosis doesn't work for our faith. And that's that is the central core of orthodoxy, is theosis. All of our theology the reason we know the theology, all the other theology of our church is true, is because it maintains the possibility of theosis. Okay. As Arius vigorously continued, Nicholas became more and more agitated. Finally, he could no longer bear to hear what he believed was essential being attacked. The outraged Nicholas got up, crossed the room, and slapped Arius across the face. The bishops were shocked. It was unbelievable that a bishop would lose control and be so hot-headed in such a solemn assembly. They brought Nicholas to Constantine. Constantine said, even though it was illegal for anyone to strike another in his presence, in this case, the bishops themselves must determine the punishment. The bishop stripped Nicholas of his bishop's garments, chained him, and threw him into jail. That would keep him away from the meeting. When the council ended, a final decision would be made about his future. Nicholas was ashamed and prayed for forgiveness, though he did not waver in his belief. During the night, the Lord Jesus Christ and Saint Mary, the Holy Theotokos, the Mother of God, appeared, asking, "Why are you in jail?" Quote, "Because of my love for you," Nicholas replied. Jesus then gave the book of the Gospels to Nicholas. The Holy Virgin gave him an omophorion. the wide band of fabric worn by bishops as a symbol of their spiritual authority. So Nicholas would once again be vested as a bishop. Now at peace, Nicholas studied the scriptures for the rest of the night. When the jailer came in the morning, he found the chains loose on the floor, and Nicholas, dressed in bishop's robes, quietly reading scriptures. When Constantine was told of this, the emperor asked that Nicholas be freed. Nicholas was then fully reinstated as the bishop of Myra. And then it talks a little bit about the Nicene Creed. And then I'm going to read this one for sure. This is about Saint Nicholas going to the temple of Artemis or Diana, depending again whether you want the Greek or the Roman nomenclature there. But he goes into the temple of the old god in the city that he is, which again, Christianity is growing, but the Edict of Milan just happened. I mean, so Edict of Milan is 313. Council of Nicaea is 325. So we're in the year of 325 now. Christianity's been legal for 12 years. But again, this is happening in the context of a pagan culture. And so many people were still burning incense and offering sacrifices to the ancient gods. St. Nicholas, after again, now just being in jail for possibly 2 months, again, being let free by Emperor Constantine himself, returns back to Myra. And the first thing he does, I'm going to destroy these damn pagan temples. So the fall of Diana. The chains had barely fallen from his wrist when Nicholas set his eyes upon the battlefield. Constantine's victory had changed everything. The persecutions had ended. Christian prisoners had been released, and for the first time, the faith could stand openly without fear. But freedom brought its own dangers. In Myra, the old gods still clung to their footholds, lurking in the shadows of temples and whispered prayers. Nicholas had returned home to find his flock wavering, torn between the newfound liberty of Christianity and the lingering allure of the ancient gods. At the heart of it loomed Artemis. The goddess had reigned over Lycia for centuries. Her grand temple, the pride of the land. Her cult was alive, thriving, its influence woven into the daily lives of the people, offering still burned on her altars. Parents still sought her blessing for their children. Sailors still carved her name into the hulls of their ships, even among those who called themselves Christians. Nicholas could not allow it. The battle for souls was not yet won, and he would not let his people slip back into the grip of darkness. He saw what others could not, the flickering shadows behind the goddess's cold stone face. The unseen spirits clinging to her sacred spaces, feeding off the devotion of the people. This was not just idolatry, it was war. With unwavering resolve, he marched to the great temple, his voice ringing like a battle cry. No longer shall this place stand against the light of Christ. With his own hands, he tore down the altars, shattering all the offerings, scattering the embers of sacrifice into dust. His followers surged behind him, emboldened by his fearless defiance. The air grew thick, charged with something unseen, something resisting. It was said that the very ground trembled as the spirits of Artemis's shrine shrieked in fury. Then came the sound, a deafening crack, like the breaking of the world. The columns, which had stood for centuries, splintered and collapsed, crashing down like giants slain in battle. The temple crumbled stone by stone, as if an invisible hand had reached from heaven and torn it apart. Artemis, once the mistress of Myra, had been dethroned. The last echoes of her power fled with the wind, leaving only silence. And in that silence, the people fell to their knees. They had seen it with their own eyes. The gods of their ancestors powerless before the name of Nicholas's Christ. The bishop, standing amidst the ruin, raised his arms, his voice steady and sure. The demons have fled, he declared. Christ alone is victorious. From that day forward, the goddess's altar stood no more. The people, awestruck and humbled, turned their prayers toward the one true God, and Nicholas, the warrior bishop, became known not just as a shepherd, but as a slayer of false gods, a defender of the faith who would not rest until every last shadow of the old world had been cast down. The war was not yet over, but on that day, Myra had been won. So really, really great stuff. Now, this is a really cool story. The prisoners and the governor's bride. Now, check this out. This is a story about how 3 Romans come to Myra on their way to Phrygia to put down a rebellion. And upon the travel, they wanted to stop and see the bishop of Myra, Saint Nicholas. At this point, his reputation was spreading. He was renowned. People knew of Saint Nicholas. And they go to spend time with him. And as he hosts them, he finds out that there's 3 Christians that are about to be executed in the town square for being thieves when they are in fact totally innocent. Nicholas then rushes to the town square to prevent their execution, and then immediately marches to the governor to condemn him, because what St. Nicholas knew that nobody knew due to his spiritual powers is that he had taken a bribe. Somebody wanted to kill these men, and the governor took money and allowed them to create whatever reason they needed to kill them. And St. Nicholas called him on it. Now, after this happens, and after the 3 Roman soldiers then move from Myra and move further east to Phrygia, put down the rebellion, and then go back to Constantinople, they are betrayed. They are betrayed by enemies within the court, and they are accused of being treasonous. They then, the 3 Romans that were with St. Nicholas, who saw all this take place in Myra, they then are imprisoned. And what happens? St. Nicholas appears in a dream to Emperor Constantine. Emperor Constantine then calls immediately for these 3 men to come talk with him. He then talks with them, and they explain their relationship to St. Nicholas, and he releases them immediately. Because St. Nicholas, just like he did for the 3 Christian boys in the town square, in the dream that St. Constantine had, St. Nicholas tells him these 3 men are innocent. So it happens twice. 3 Christians in Myra, and then the 3 Romans who were with Nicholas in Myra happens again to them. So check this out. All right. So Nicholas welcomed the officers into his home, offering them the same hospitality he extended to all travelers. They spoke of their mission, of the unrest in Phrygia, and of the emperor's desires to restore order. But their conversation was soon interrupted by distant shouts, a growing tumult that rolled through the streets like an approaching storm. A breathless messenger arrived, his face pale with urgency. "A riot has broken out in the marketplace, Holy Father. The people cry for blood. The governor has ordered executions." Nicholas rose at once. "Who has been condemned?" 3 men accused of theft, the messenger gasped. "The charges are unclear, but the sentence is death." The bishop turned to the officers. "Come with me." Without hesitation, Nepothianus, Ursus, and Herpilion followed the bishop as he strode through the city streets, his pace swift and unyielding. The marketplace was in chaos. A crowd had gathered, voices raised in anger and fear. Before them stood the executioner, his sword poised above the neck of the first condemned man. Nicholas did not slow. He did not waver. With the full force of his righteous fury, he stepped forward and seized the executioner's sword, wrenching it from his grasp. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "These men are innocent," Nicholas declared, his voice like thunder rolling across the hills. The executioner faltered, his eyes darting toward the governor's men, but Nicholas was unshaken. He moved to the prisoners, unbinding their hands, lifting them to their feet. The officers, having seen many battles, had never witnessed such fearless conviction. They could feel the weight of something greater than mere human authority in Nicholas's presence. It was as though the air itself had stilled, waiting for the governor's response. Nicholas did not wait. He turned and strode toward the praetorium, his robes flowing behind them, his eyes burning with the fire of divine justice. The 3 officers, these are the 3 Roman soldiers, followed him, flanking him as he pushed open the doors with the strength of a man half his age. The governor, Eustathius, stood in his chambers, a goblet of wine in his hand. When he saw Nicholas, he set it down with a nervous smile. "Holy Father," he began, "I did not expect sacrilegious bloodshed." Nicholas thundered, advancing without hesitation. "How dare you commit such an atrocity? You are entrusted with the governance of these people, and yet you have condemned the innocent?" The governor swallowed hard, taking a step back. I was misled," he stammered. "My officials told me you were bribed." Nicholas cut him off, his gaze unrelenting. "I know of your corruption, Eustathius. You have perverted justice for your own gain." The room fell silent. Eustathius paled, then fell to his knees. "Forgive me, Holy Father. I swear I will overturn the charges. The prisoners will be released at once." Nicholas watched him for a long moment. Then, with a nod, he turned to the three officers. "See that justice is done." Nepotianus, Ursus, and Herpilion bowed their heads. They had faced war, commanded legions, and yet they had never encountered a man like this. A man who held no sword, yet wielded authority that made emperors tremble. Months later, the three officers returned to Constantinople, their mission in Phrygia completed. They expected to resume their duties and service to the empire. Instead, they were met with betrayal. Rivals at the court had conspired against them, weaving false charges of treason. Before they could mount a defense, they were arrested and thrown into prison, condemned to die. That night, as they awaited execution, they knelt in their cell and prayed, not to the emperor, not to Rome, but to Saint Nicholas of Myra. In his chambers, Emperor Constantine slept fitfully. His dreams twisted into a vision. An old man clad in a bishop's robe, standing before him with piercing eyes. Quote, "Do not harm these men," the figure intoned. "They are innocent." The emperor stirred, but the vision did not fade. The bishop raised his hand in warning. "If you do not release them, the judgment of God will be upon you." Constantine awoke in a cold sweat. He called for his guards and demanded the prisoners be brought before him at once. When they arrived, he studied them carefully. "Tell me more about this Bishop Nicholas," St. Constantine demanded. The officers exchanged glances. "He is the Bishop of Myra," Nepotianus mentioned, "a holy man." Ursus added, "When we were in Lycia, we saw him stop an execution with his own hands. He is unlike any other." Constantine exhaled slowly. He had heard whispers of Nicholas before, of miracles, of healings, of justice done with a mere word, and now the saint had come to him in a dream. "Go," the emperor finally said, "return to Lycia and thank this man for saving your lives." Nicholas received the three officers when they arrived in Myra. Weary but full of gratitude, they knelt before him, offering gifts from the emperor himself, gold, incense, and a set of beautifully woven vestments, symbolizing the authority that even the greatest rulers of the world now recognized in St. Nicholas. But Nicholas merely smiled. "Go," he said, "serve with justice, protect the innocent, and remember that true power does not lie in the sword, but in the mercy of God." The officers departed, forever changed. The man they met in Myra was no ordinary bishop. He was a guardian of the helpless, a warrior for the righteous, a saint whose name would be spoken long after emperors had turned to dust, and his work was far from over. So that concludes that chapter. And then the next chapter, the sailors and the storm. In this section, Saint Nicholas appears to sailors who are in the middle of a storm. His legend by this time had spread everywhere, right? Emperor Constantine's first encounter with Saint Nicholas is him slapping Arius. And then the second one, if St. Constantine already forgot about, the Bishop of Myra, is these three men are prepared for execution the next day. And then St. Nicholas appears in the dream of St. Constantine, of which he had already heard of all these miracles and things that he was doing in Anatolia, and then sends him gold, fine silks, relics, new vestments. So the Emperor of Rome, Constantine, was showering St. Nicholas in gifts, and then his legend was already spreading everywhere. Now, this one is very interesting. A merchant ship carrying grain and precious goods made its way through the treacherous waters of the Aegean. Bound for a distant port, the sailors, hardened men who had spent their lives at sea, knew the signs of a coming storm. The air grew heavy. The sky darkened. The wind took on a restless quality, whispering of coming danger. When the first waves crashed against the hull with unnatural force, they knew they were in the grip of something beyond their control. The tempest descended upon them like a living thing, tearing at the sails and twisting their ship as though it were a mere plaything. The captain bellowed orders, his voice nearly swallowed by the roaring wind, but all their skill, all their experience was for naught. The storm would take them. It was then that one of the men, recalling tales told in Myra, cried out, "O holy Nicholas, help us!" And something happened. A figure stood among them, calm amid the chaos, his bishop's robes untouched by the raging storm. He raised a hand in blessing, and at once the winds lessened, the waves stilled, and the ship found itself gliding safely upon placid waters. The sailors fell to their knees in gratitude, realizing they had been saved by none other than Bishop Nicholas of Myra. When they finally made port in Myra, they went straight to the great cathedral to give thanks, and there, standing in the flesh, was Nicholas himself, waiting for them. He offered no explanation, only a knowing smile and a blessing. The sailors who had seen him on the ship now stood before him in awe. He had been with them in the storm, and now he was here in the cathedral, as though he had never left. This story spread, carried from sailor to sailor, port to port, until his name became inseparable from the sea itself. From that day forward, Nicholas became the patron of sailors, his image carved into ships, his name invoked before every voyage. For the men who braved the open waters, Nicholas was more than a saint. He was their guardian. Word of Nicholas's miracles had reached the ears of Emperor Constantine, who ruled over the vast Roman Empire. Though the days of persecution had ended, governance still demanded difficult decisions, and the burden of taxation weighed heavily on the people. The region of Lycia already struggled, faced yet another increase in imperial taxes, one that would push many into ruin. Nicholas, ever the defender of his people, could not stand idly by. Though the journey was long, more than 300 miles to Constantinople, he set out, determined to plead their case before the emperor himself. When he arrived at the imperial palace, Nicholas was granted an audience. The emperor, despite his power, found himself captivated by the presence of the Bishop of Myra. There was something in his gaze, something unyielding, yet filled with grace. Nicholas did not bow or flatter, nor did he argue with politics or polity. He simply stated his plea: lower the taxes of Lycia. The court was silent. The emperor hesitated. Then, to the shock of his advisors, Emperor Constantine agreed. He ordered the tax burden for Lycia be greatly reduced and sealed the decree with his imperial seal, making it law. Nicholas, satisfied, took the parchment, rolled it up, tied it with a string, and left. What happened next was something that no one could explain. The next morning, Emperor Constantine awoke with doubts gnawing at him. Had he been too generous? Had he allowed himself to be swayed too easily? He summoned his advisors, who urged him to revoke the decree before it could take effect. Quote, "Bring me the document," the emperor commanded. But Nicholas had disappeared. Worse still, when the emperor's men searched, they found no trace of the decree. In the coastal city of Myra, fishermen, however, pulling in their nets, found something unusual tangled among their catch, a sealed document, miraculously unspoiled by the water. When they unfurled it, they found the emperor's decree safe and intact, confirming the reduced taxes of Lycia. The people rejoiced, and the story became legend. Saint Nicholas had given their burden to the sea, and the sea had delivered it to them. When Constantine learned what happened, he could only shake his head in amazement. The bishop of Myra was no ordinary man. He had bested emperors and storms alike, bending the very forces of nature to his will. So again, an amazing story that the document, what legend is, what the tradition is that Saint Nicholas, upon receiving this document from Emperor Constantine, threw it in the water, the sea, and the sea took it to the port in Lycia, in which a fisherman found it, opened it, read it, and therefore all of Lycia knew that their taxes were reduced, thereby preventing Constantine from reneging on the agreement he made with Saint Nicholas. That's why Saint Constantine was amazed. Here's another story. It's a famine. There's a famine occurring in Myra, across Lycia. Well, in multiple places. Life is tough. They don't have grain. They don't have food. People are starving. And so not long after, Lycia faced a new threat, not from taxes nor from the sea, but from the silent grip of famine. The fields had failed. The granaries were empty, and hunger settled upon the people like a slow-moving plague. Nicholas once again could not stand idly by. One morning, as he walked along the harbor, he saw a great merchant ship, its hold filled with grain, bound for Alexandria. The captain and crew were preparing to depart when Nicholas approached. Quote, "You must sell us some of your grain," Nicholas said. The captain hesitated. "I cannot. Every sack must be accounted for when I arrive in Alexandria. If I arrive short, I will be punished." Nicholas met his gaze. "Do not be afraid. If you give to the people of Myra, when you reach Alexandria, your ship will be made whole, and no one will find anything missing." The captain, uncertain, finally agreed. He offloaded part of his cargo, distributing grain among the people. At once, the famine lifted. The grain lasted not just for the season, but for 2 years. And when the ship arrived in Alexandria, the captain discovered something astonishing. His cargo hold was full, as though nothing had ever been taken. It was a miracle that would be recounted for generations among the testament of the bishop of Myra, who never turned away from those in need. And then this is the last years and the repose of our great Saint Bishop. All right. The bells of Myra tolled gently in the cool morning air, their deep tones resonating through the city like a solemn hymn. Inside the church, Bishop Nicholas stood at the altar, his hands raised in blessing. His face, lined with years of fasting, prayer, service, was peaceful, his eyes alight with the same quiet fire that had burned in him since his youth. The people of Myra had come to love him as more than their bishop. He was their protector, their shepherd, their intercessor before God. Word had spread the final days. Well, I'm going to skip a section. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Nicholas sat upon the worn wooden bench outside his church, watching as the last golden light bathed the city. This is the night of his repose. The people of Myra moved through the streets, some pausing to greet him with reverence, others bowing their heads in silent prayer. Beside him sat a young deacon, Stephanos, who had been by his side for years, learning from him, tending to his needs. The deacon studied the old bishop's face, noting the lines carved by time, the frailty in his hands. Father, Stephanos began, his voice thick with emotion, do you know how much the people love you? Nicholas chuckled softly, his eyes never leaving the horizon. It is not me they love, child. It is Christ in me. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the rustling of olive leaves in the evening breeze. You are tired, Stephanos finally said. Nicholas nodded. Yes, my son. The hour is near. Stephanos swallowed hard. What will we do without you? Nicholas turned to him then, his gaze sharp, filled with something beyond this world. Quote, you will do as we have always done. Serve, love, and pray. The work is never finished, Stephanos. My time is ending, but the church endures. Tears welled up in the young deacon's eyes. Will you stay with us in spirit? Nicholas smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. I will never truly leave, my son. And Stephanos believed him. That night, Nicholas retired to a small chamber in the church, a room bare except for a simple wooden bed, a single candle, and an icon of Christ upon the wall. He knelt before it, as he had done every night for years, and prayed. Lord, he whispered, his voice hoarse with age, I have walked the path you set before me. I have fought for the poor, the innocent, the suffering. I have sought you in all things. And if it is your will, call me home. A peace settled over him. The air in the chamber grew thick with something unseen, something holy. A fragrance of myrrh, sweet and overwhelming, filled the room. Then a vision. The walls of the chamber melted away. A great light filled his sight, a radiance more brilliant than the sun, and in its center, Christ. His face was beyond description, more beautiful than any earthly thing, yet filled with a sorrowful love. He reached out a hand, and Nicholas felt the warmth of it, the overwhelming presence of divine mercy. It is time, the voice of the Savior whispered. Nicholas closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. The candle flickered once and went out. When morning came, the people of Myra found their beloved bishop lying in his chamber, his hands folded upon his chest and a serene smile upon his lips. But the room was filled with the scent of myrrh, not the ordinary myrrh used in anointing, but something richer, something divine. It seeped from the bishop's skin, from his burial shroud, pooling beneath his body like a sacred river. The people wept. They gathered around him, mourning not as those who had lost a leader, but as a child grieving their father. They carried his body into the great church of Myra, laying him to rest beneath the altar. And still the myrrh flowed. Pilgrims came from across the land, drawn by whispers of the miracle. They knelt before his tomb, dipping their hands into the fragrant oil. Those who touched it were healed. Blind men saw. The lame walked. The sick were restored. The news spread. Nicholas of Myra was dead, but he was not gone. His presence remained. His miracles continued. His prayers, whispered beyond the veil of death, still reached the ears of God. And the people knew Saint Nicholas had become something more than a bishop, more than a protector of Myra. He had become a saint for the whole world. Empires rose and fell. Kings came and went. Cities crumbled into dust. But the name of Nicholas remained. His tomb became a place of pilgrimage, a sign of countless miracles. The myrrh continued to flow, a sign that his presence endured beyond the grave. And when the cold winds howled through the streets, when hope seemed distant, and the night felt too long, his name was still spoken, and miracles still happened, because Nicholas of Myra never truly died, and he never will. Nicholas was laid to rest in Myra, his body enshrined within the great cathedral where he had shepherded his flock. The scent of incense filled the chamber as mourners wept. their grief tempered by the certainty that their beloved bishop had not truly left them. His presence lingered in the very walls of the church, in the streets he had walked, and in the hearts of those he had blessed. Then, from the stone of his tomb, a wondrous sign emerged. Sweet, fragrant myrrh began to seep through the marble, shimmering in candlelight, as though Nicholas himself still shed tears of compassion for his flock. Pilgrims who touched the miraculous myrrh found themselves healed. The suffering gained comfort, and the lost discovered hope. The sacred fragrance, at once earthly and heavenly, served as tangible proof that Nicholas's intercession continued beyond death. Word of this marvel spread swiftly, crossing borders, mountains, and seas. Pilgrims journeyed great distances to kneel at Saint Nicholas's tomb, pressing cloths against the holy myrrh, returning to their homes carrying fragments of his blessing. Sailors whispered prayers during fierce storms. Prisoners called upon his name behind iron bars, and merchants etched his likeness into tokens of protection. Nicholas's presence was everywhere, bound neither by death nor by geography. But peace was never guaranteed. Centuries passed, and the empire Nicholas knew transformed, succumbing eventually to new threats from the east. Invaders pressed upon the gates of Myra, threatening to extinguish its Christian flame forever. Fearful of desecration and loss, the faithful clung desperately to their saint, praying fervently that his holy relics would be spared. Then in the year 1087, sailors from Bari, Italy, anchored off Myra's coast. Hearing of the peril facing Nicholas's resting place, they vowed to protect the saint by taking his relics to safety. Under the cover of darkness, driven by devotion and desperation, they breached the cathedral doors and opened the tomb. The air trembled as the stone slab was lifted, revealing Nicholas's remains still fragrant with the unceasing flow of sacred myrrh. Myra's priests and monks protested, weeping as they witnessed the removal of their beloved protector, but their cries went unheeded. With solemn reverence yet relentless purpose, the sailors carried Nicholas's relics onto their ship. Setting sail through perilous seas, storms raged, waves rose like mountains, and lightning crackled as though heaven itself mourned the displacement. Yet the vessel preserved, protected by the saint whose relics it bore. Upon arrival in Bari, the relics were placed within a newly built basilica. The myrrh continued to flow abundantly, demonstrating Nicholas's unwavering favor and compassion. Pilgrims, both noble and humble, flocked to the basilica, drawn by stories of miracles as fresh and frequent as ever. The saint who had guarded Myra was now a guardian to the wider world. Nicholas's relics had transcended borders and kingdoms, ensuring that his comforting presence remained accessible to all. The myrrh continued to flow, never ceasing, an eternal testament to a saint who had never left and never would. And so this, guys, that is just a little snippet. It's kind of the main highlights that I wanted to share with you guys of the book, Saint Nicholas the Wonderworker, The Real Story of Santa Claus. As I said, guys, if you have children, if you are Orthodox and you have children, buy this book. It's $15. It is a great reading every Christmas for your children. And if you want to read, the night before Christmas or something like that, make this the context in which Santa Claus is understood. We can't do a whole lot to change the way that contemporary Christmas celebration has incorporated pagan elements and essentially divorced Santa Claus from his Orthodox Christian origins. That was the beginning of the stream, the little document I put together, which will be available over at the Logos Academy. But you can't help but notice that the modern Santa Claus has no religious theological context to him. Now that, again, as I highlighted at the beginning of the stream, is due to the Reformation. However, I think one of the things we can do, and I met an Orthodox family. Shout out to Zach and Haley. These are my friends. They have a beautiful family. They're Orthodox Christians. And I remember when I was in Florida with them, we were on the beach, and one of their little girls, she was saying or doing something. I said, well, you better be good or Santa's not going to bring you anything. She looked, I mean, she got to be like 5 years old. She looked at me and goes, I already know Santa's not real. And so Zach and Haley, good Orthodox Christians, had already told, they never did the Santa Claus myth with their kids. And my thought was, wow, okay, that's great. But this is a book that you can read that has mystery, that has miracles, that has history, and it's a true saint. It's a true living human saint that miracles are still attested to today. And so if you were to read some of the contemporary Christian, Christmas stuff, but you read this book first, at least your children would be able to understand who Santa Claus is and who Saint Nicholas is. So major thank you. Shout out to John Hammond, Robert John Hammond, author of the book. Thank you for sponsoring the stream, brother. He just said, thank you, Kodal. Appreciate your support and prayers. Keep up the good work. Well, thank you, brother. You keep up the good work as well, man. It's amazing how many books you've pumped out. I mean, if you look on Amazon, now he's already written some of them, but he's pumped out like 5 books within a 1.5 to 2 year period. Like John's really working. But this book in particular, I love all his books. You can find my streams on all his books. This book, every English-speaking Orthodox Christian family should have this book. Yeah. So thank you, John. Really appreciate it. What'd you guys think of the stream? Absolutely. Saint Nicholas, pray for us. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, Crispy said, I wish I had known all this when I visited his crypt in the Church of Bari. Oh, cool, dude. I would love to go do a pilgrimage to the Basilica in Bari and venerate Saint Nicholas. That's why I was telling you guys that, I've read quite a bit about Saint Nicholas, but the stories and the sort of cinematic and poetic way in which they're presented in this book, it's so good for anybody. You do not have to have a theological background or anything like this. This is so compelling. It's so easy to understand. It'd be great for children because of the storytelling. So yeah, John, you really did a good job with this book, man. I think this is one that you could read every single year with your children. Texas Nevsky became a new Kodal crew member. Thank you so much, Texas Nevsky. God bless you, brother. Really appreciate that. The Big Rick Show throws in 2, says, may the prayers of Saint Nicholas be with you. Absolutely. May Saint Nicholas bless all of you, protect you guys, and be the giver of blessings and gifts this season for you and your family. Branwolf throws in 10. Thank you very much, Branwolf. He says, they told us Santa wasn't real to stop us from going to church. Yeah. Well, that's my point is Saint Nicholas is so much more badass than Santa Claus, right? Think of the whole story I just told you guys is way cooler. A guy who's chopping down cypress trees that pagan gods are in, tearing down the temple of Artemis, being persecuted for 6 to 10 years in a prison, in a Roman prison, exorcising demons in the marketplace, healing a woman's withered hand. And for him, and this is one of the things, and this was my takeaway, my personal takeaway after reading this is just having more trust and faith in God's plan for our lives. Right. It's so hard to do, especially like I worry sometimes about finances and being able to make enough money and support my family and, stuff like that. We've just had some major expenditures that we had to do. And so I'm constantly thinking about money and like these pragmatic things and all the work I got to get done and content I got to create. And sometimes you lose the clarity, or maybe it's not even clarity. It's like the reassurance. The spiritual reassurance just to let go and know that God has you where you need to be. Doesn't mean you don't have to continue your work. You do. You still got to work, but just be okay with it. and just embrace the journey God has you on, because multiple times in the book, the way that John frames it is Saint Nicholas, no matter where he's at, whether he's in prison, whether he's going back to Myra, whether he's, protecting the flock that he shepherded, he always talks about the journey that God has him on. And that's kind of the race that we're all trying to run, right? Is to complete the journey that God has us on. And it's not that there's like a destiny, right? So whatever your journey and purpose is, obviously we can fall short of it by making the wrong decisions and not doing the journey. But just imagine that there is a journey. There is a heroic story for every single one of us. And if we follow Christ and we give up the anxiety and just be reassured that he's got us, like he's got us. Things are going to work out. That was my big takeaway. And that is like the ultimate gift, right? We're talking about Christmas and Christmas gifts, and maybe parents stressing about buying gifts for their children, because that's a real pressure. Let's face it. You got kids. You want to give them the Christmas experience that we all had as kids. And there's a lot of pressure on spending money and buying stuff. And, everybody knows that the Christmas season can be difficult. But at least for us adults, I think a huge takeaway from the season is just to be reassured in God's providence in history. No matter what's going on in the world right now, God's providence for our personal lives. Like that, just be still. So I don't know. That was my takeaway after reading the book. And so doing my prayers this morning, doing my scripture reading, and I just felt a sort of rejuvenation in my acceptance of God's providence. And so I don't know, maybe you guys will get that too. I don't know. Lockstep throws in 5. Thank you so much, Lockstep, for the support. Really appreciate you. Gorilla Biscuit gifted a Total Crew membership. Thank you very much, Gorilla Biscuit. Do appreciate that. Let me see if anybody sent anything in. Guys, if you have any questions or comments, or you want to support the work or appreciated the stream, feel free to send any questions or comments in. Okay, so Paris Alexandru sent in another super chat, maybe clarifying the one earlier. So earlier he was asking about how the Greek Orthodox Church venerates Saint Basil on the 1st of January instead of Santa Claus since the 4th century. Okay, so I think he's clarifying because I wasn't sure what he was asking. And he says here, in Greek Orthodox tradition, Saint Nicholas is patron of sailors, and Saint Basil, who founded hospitals, orphanages, etc., is Santa Claus. We venerate him on January 1st, and that is when we exchange gifts. Do you have a view on that? Oh, no. No, I don't, Paris. I wasn't aware that in Greek culture you refer to Saint Basil as Santa Claus. I wasn't aware of that. So I really don't have much to comment on that. I was aware of him founding hospitals and orphanages. I did a stream on, I forget the title. I think it was something like How Christianity Civilized the World, or maybe it was on hospitals, maybe hospitals, something like that. And I talked about the history of Christian origins regarding hospitals, orphanages, and stuff like that. So I was aware of Saint Basil's legacy. I did not know that's what you were saying. Because when you said instead of Santa Claus, I thought you meant instead of Saint Nick. But you guys refer to Basil as Santa Claus? I have never heard that before. So thank you for sharing that with me, Paris. I wasn't aware. Never heard that. Ortho Matthew throws in $10. Thank you very much, Ortho Matthew. He says, although having a tree for Christmas isn't sinful, I do think it may confuse the little Orthodox children when they see something that is basically secular in stories all over, but also in a home or parish, just something to a certain, not Ortho Matthew. I don't get that. I don't get how a Christmas tree is secular. I mean, you can easily, if you have children, you can easily sanctify a Christmas tree because Christ was crucified on the tree. I mean, obviously the cross, but sometimes it's referred to as the tree. And he is the tree of life, right? And the tree of life is giving the blessings of life. And so you could easily reformulate the Christmas tree in your house as indicative of Christ. And you could, for example, my wife and I, we just put up this is truly our first Christmas together in our new place, right? And so we got a Christmas tree. We put one up. She decorated how she wanted. And then we put little icons of Orthodox saints. Like she wanted one of Evgenia, her patron saint. We have the Theotokos. We have Christ. We have these little icons, the real small ones, and then kind of wedge them into the tree. And so our tree has lights, but you can see the lights shimmer off the face of the icons. And so when I have children, I will do the Christmas tree. I like the Christmas tree. But what I'll do is repackage what it means. We don't do a Christmas tree for Santa Claus. For us, the Christmas tree is indicative of Christ being the tree of life. So, yeah, I get what you mean because I've heard the Christmas Yuletide celebration of Odin, right? And in the Yuletide celebration of Odin, they would have they would get a massive tree, and they would catch it on fire, and it would burn for like 12 days. They would feast 10, maybe it was 10 days, I forget. Anyways, multiple days, the pagans would feast. Again, imagine it's very, very cold. These are ancient medieval times. It's very cold, and they would burn a massive amount of wood, these large, ginormous trees, and they would feast. Okay. Does that mean our feast days are pagan? I feel like we can go too far. And I think a more appropriate approach as Orthodox Christians, especially in the West, we're American. I'm very American. I'm trying to shed my modernist disposition and presuppositions as an American. But as Orthodox Christians, we get to sanctify our culture. Right? So when Orthodoxy goes into different cultures, it sanctifies it. And I feel like we have the opportunity as Orthodox Christians to take aspects of our culture and reincorporate them in a symbolic way that reflects our Orthodox faith. And so instead of doing away with the Christmas tree, why don't we re-sanctify the Christmas tree as Orthodox, as pointing back towards Christ? So that'd be my response to that. But if you don't want to do a Christmas tree, you don't have to. You don't have to. So anyways, Ortho Matthew, thank you very much for the $10 super chat. I do appreciate it. Vigo says America must be baptized by triple immersion. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What do I think about moral Platonism? Moral Platonism. The problem with moral Platonism, it would just be another precept critique, is how do you get objective moralities in Platonism? Like, I can definitely see the objective standard that morals exist in the ideal forms, that there is an objective moral law, but how do you come to know that? Right? If it's just through natural observation, as an Orthodox Christian, we'd say, well, that doesn't go very far. That's why we always appeal to revelation. That's what I mean by presupping. Our morality isn't a philosophical deliberation. Our morality is revealed by God, and it's attested to by the incarnation of God, Jesus Christ. That's where our morality comes from. So, though, if you were to have that perspective, I believe in, orthodoxy, at least in my perspective. There's aspects of Platonism that we embrace, but once you start getting into morality and ethics, that has to be rooted back into revelation and the incarnation. That is where morality comes from. So what are my thoughts? my thoughts are, yeah, I agree in the concept of the ideals, the logismi, or the logi and the logos, but without revelation and without the incarnation, there is no conversation on morality. Okay. Oh, Lockstep threw in a generous. Thank you so much, Lockstep. Really appreciate it. He says, we have a Christmas tree and stockings here. I did enjoy the fairy tale Santa as a kid, the old cartoons, etc. We aren't doing it with my son, but do you feel it's wrong to sort of play that game with the very young? I'm not sure. I know a lot of Orthodox parents, my age, older, and some of them still do the ones that I know make it explicit that Santa Claus is Saint Nicholas. I don't know how much they go into explaining who Saint Nicholas is. That's why you need this book right here. But they still, participate in the sort of commodified, commercialized, secularized Santa Claus, Coca-Cola Santa Claus of contemporary America. And yeah, when I was a kid, I loved that stuff too. I I don't remember when exactly I stopped believing in Santa. I had an older sister, so I don't know exactly how. And I had a friend who had older brother. I'm pretty sure they told me at a pretty young age, because I had my best friend was my neighbor, and he was a year older. And then he had two much older brothers. One was like in high school while we were kids. So we got exposed to a lot at a young age through my friend's brothers. So I don't remember holding on to Santa Claus, like later into my early years. It is something magical. It is something fun for the family. But I've heard Orthodox Christians contemplate whether it's actually like lying to your children, right? I remember talking with one guy, I forget, this was years ago, and he was like, yeah, the reason I don't tell my kids about Santa Claus or never allowed them to believe in the, modern Santa Claus is because I didn't want them to ever associate me with lying to them. And so he just told them at like a super young age. And it kind of is like, that's basically what Zach and Haley, my friends, did with their kids. I don't see there anything wrong with that. I can definitely see wanting to be part of the Christmas season. It's fun. It's fun. And it brings back a lot of memories, like the claymation Rudolph. I don't even know what it's called. You know what I'm talking about? It almost looks like Gumby, the little claymation figures. There's like a Christmas movie with Rudolph. You guys got to know what I'm talking about. Somebody in the chats probably knows what that. And so one guy I talked to, yeah, exactly, Lockstep. He didn't want to ever allow his children to have an instance in which they said, you lied to me when I wanted to know something. So I can definitely get that. As you said, are you lying and setting a weird precedent? I don't think you're exactly lying. Obviously, I get that perspective. I don't even know how I'm going to approach it once I have children. Maybe I'll be really hardcore. I don't know. This is a great point too. So Slowboy Whiteboard says people don't want their kids to know that their parents are the ones giving them gifts because they don't want them to get upset when they don't get what they want. Well, maybe not the part what they don't want, but here's the thing that I thought about, right? What is Saint Nicholas's command to oh my gosh, I keep forgetting the guy's name that had the Callictus. He's the one with the 3 daughters that got the gold coins from Saint Nick. What was Saint Nicholas's command? That's his first miracle, by the way. That was his first miracle, was giving the gold coins to Callictus. What did he tell him after the 3rd drop of the gold coins? Basically, go and do the same, meaning give anonymous gifts. So here is the thing that I was thinking about before the stream today, is that with the Santa Claus legend, you could say that It allows parents to give gifts to children while remaining anonymous. And I thought, okay, well, that's actually pretty Christian. That's a pretty Christian value to kind of instill. But what if you just focus, like this was kind of my thought on, again, I don't know what I'm going to do with my children, but this was my thought in preparation for today, is to just replace Santa Claus with Saint Nicholas. So say Saint Nicholas brought these gifts. Saint Nick, Christmas morning, there's all the gifts. It's not from Santa Claus, it's from Saint Nicholas. Now, is that lying? Saint Nicholas maybe didn't actually go buy the PlayStation for your kid, but Saint Nicholas is the entire spirit for giving gifts at Christmas season in the first place. So I was thinking today, why don't we just say Saint Nicholas brought the gift? Saint Nicholas got your PlayStation. And when they're old enough to understand, you can explain, yes, it is Saint Nicholas, because Saint Nicholas and the spirit of giving wants us to give anonymously. He wants us to give gifts without getting any reward or satisfaction from it. The satisfaction is the doing the thing in itself. So from that perspective, you could then say all your gifts are from Saint Nicholas. You could allow your children to watch some of the Santa Claus stuff. I don't know how you want to deal with the reindeer if they ask, Mom, Dad, are the reindeers real? Does Saint Nicholas ride on reindeers? No. That's up to each person, parent, how you guys want to do that. But I was thinking that the whole foundational point of American commercialized Christmas, secularized Christmas, and Saint Nicholas is the giving of gifts. And so if you just give the gifts, allowing the anonymous, it's from Santa Claus, allowing the anonymous, but it's from Saint Nicholas, I think you kind of get around it. What do you guys think? We want our kids to fit in. Okay, I get it. Loxef says, not my fault you didn't get a car at 18. Santa brought you a spatula. Over easy, please. Did Nicholas do the miracles or God did them through him? God does the miracles. Yeah. Nobody does miracles on their own. That's called magic. But all miracles, every miracle that we mentioned in here is done by God. It's the faithfulness of Saint Nicholas that is the conduit for God to work in the world. That's why faith over reason. Because you can't rationally believe in a miracle, because a miracle by definition is irregular, right? Rationality is about recognizing patterns. So how things normally work. A miracle by definition is outside the normal pattern, or it wouldn't be a miracle, right? So faith is what allows for miracles, not rational certainty. So it's God that does all the miracles, but he can only do miracles through people that have faith. It's the faith that is the conduit for God's grace in the world. That's a good idea, but let's just be different. Bro, who the F said they want their kids to fit in? We homeschool because we don't want our kids to fit in. I think they were joking. I think Heidi said it's quote, we want our kids to fit in. And she's saying, Lord have mercy. She's not actually saying she wants her kids to fit in. I don't think anybody watching this stream wants to be part of mainstream American culture. But yeah, that was the idea. Is I think the first step we need to do is just replace Santa Claus with Saint Nicholas and allow Santa Claus to assume some sort of lower identity of Saint Nicholas. That's why my whole point is get this book, read this to your children leading up to Christmas. Maybe you read it multiple times. And if you want to read 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, that's what my mother read to me before, on Christmas Eve. There is something, maybe it's just sentimentality. There is something special about that. Not saying that the poem The Night Before Christmas is anything, super special, but I don't know. You could maybe read that in the context of reading this book, and your child doesn't fall victim to the Santa Claus myth like other children. You should do a stream with inspiring philosophy on the paganism of Christianity. He's very against that. I keep hearing about inspiring philosophy, and I haven't watched his stuff. I'd be very open to that. Very open to that. Let me just make sure I got all the super chats. Anybody have any questions or comments or support they want? Oh, Heidi B. Mary throws in a generous $20 over on Dono Chat. Thank you so much, Heidi. God bless you. Really appreciate that. Let me just check Streamlabs to see if there's anyone who sent in a super chat over there. Add to the wish list. Them pagan idiots. No, they really are. Pagans are idiots. And I think paganism is going to grow. As I talked about, my whole thesis with the pre-modernity thing is that I think paganism is actually on the rise. So I think the paganism and the right-wing movement where you either become trad Christian, trad Catholic or Orthodox, or you become like a pagan. I mean, a lot of them are pagan. I may do a stream in the future talking about pagans and stuff like that. I don't know. But anyways, guys, I have a bunch of content. My next stream is going to be why I'm a Christian supremacist. So I'm going to be doing that either Sunday or Monday. And let's see, next Tuesday. So I'll do that stream. And then Tuesday, I'll be on with Father Peter Hears over on Orthodox Ethos to promote my book, Return to Babylon from Adam to Antichrist. If you have an online following or know anybody that has an online following, I would be very appreciative of anybody who wanted to interview me about my book. Anthony Westgate is the only one to have done so far. I really appreciate him taking the time and reading my first 2 chapters. But we'll be doing that with Father Peter Hears. Anybody that you know of, mention to some people, hey, have DPH on. You should read his book. I'd greatly appreciate that. Derek says, this was a great stream, DPH. Always love the streams on the lives of the saints. I do too. They're not very popular. If I was coming in here talking about drama between Candace Owens and Tim Pool, I'm sure we would have had a much bigger audience. But I just think, John's work is worthy of talking about. John obviously supports my work. He sponsored the stream. But I've done 5 books from John. They're all quality. And this one, I would say, is probably my favorite just because I see it as something that could be used in a family setting year after year after year. So major thank you to John. Thank you to everyone being here. Thank you to everyone who supported the stream tonight. Heidi said, you have a blessing from God. Well, God willing, I do. Thank you for that, Heidi. Thank you for your support too, sister. I do appreciate it. I425. As an Eastern Orthodox, I don't find pagan traditions of the past bad as they got syncretized. It's, however, cringe to try to revive archaic ways of life that have no inherent meaning beside aesthetics. That plus they don't even have the rituals anymore. Right? That's the thing about, modern paganism is essentially LARPing. So much of the pagan cultures is not written, right? Beowulf is like one of the first, legends that's actually articulated in English. There's so much. You want to be a Norse pagan? Oh yeah. What does that mean? It's like Terence McKenna's Shaman clause. It takes the vantage point. You have to be in the 20th century to even construct that hermeneutic in which it correlates and makes sense, because it's totally anachronistic to the development of Christmas and how we celebrate and who Santa Claus is and all that different stuff. So I'm with you. To be a pagan is totally anachronistic because they basically have to take the few elements of the old pagan faith that they're aware of and then incorporate all this new stuff because they have no idea what they did. They don't know how the rituals worked. They don't know what the Druids did. Neo-Druidism, give me a break. Give me a break. Protestantism really ruins everything great about Christianity. I feel like I hate it more and more every week. Well, don't hate people. Don't hate people. It's fair enough to hate Protestantism, though. I mean, I'll be posting the clip of my little document that I did earlier in the stream. If it wasn't for Protestantism, we wouldn't even have modern Santa Claus. It's only because Protestantism hated the saints, prevented veneration of Saint Nicholas to the degree that they had to rebrand Saint Nicholas as something else. And they incorporated all these Northern European myths and folklore to do so. So, yeah. He runs the Roots of Everything channel under the Ancient Faith umbrella. Oh. Have you ever considered doing a stream with Dr. Zachary Porku of Roots of Everything? Keep up the great work. Yes, actually. I planned on reaching out to Dr. Porku. I have his book on, what is it? I'm blanking on the title. It's something to reality. It's talking about the sort of mysticism of orthodoxy and the sacraments and stuff like that. Very, very digestible for the average reader. I am aware of Dr. Zachary Porku, and I have a friend who actually gave me his phone number. So, and my life has been so hectic the last 2 months. So my goal is to reach out to him and actually do a stream on modernity, because I've cut a couple of his public free streams. And we basically, he's a Lewis Mumford fan. A lot of people don't know who Lewis Mumford is. He mentions him. And he is also very critical of modernity. So I would love to, Journey to Reality. Thank you. I knew it was to reality. It wasn't coming to me. But I plan on having Dr. Porku on. I want to do a stream with him as well. He's got some really good stuff. There's so many. I want to do one with Father Paul. There's so many priests and Orthodox guys. So many PhDs. I want to do, Dr. David Bradshaw. Like, I'm going to be getting all these people on in the near future. Right now, the first couple of weeks of December is me trying to get caught up on all these sponsored streams and things that I got to do. And then that allowed me to kind of schedule, because I always feel bad when people sponsor streams. It takes me at least a day or two to prepare for a sponsored stream, because a lot of times it's something I don't even know about. So then I feel bad because people message me, they purchased it 2 weeks ago. Well, I got other streams to do before that, and they'll be like, hey, I bought your stream or sponsored a stream. Do you have it done yet? And it's like, no, brother, I haven't even started. I got actually 3 other sponsored streams to do. So right now I have 4 sponsored streams, all pretty cool topics. So I'm going to be pumping those out along with a handful of streams that I personally want to do, like being a Christian supremacist. And so I'm going to put those together. And this month I plan, I'll be doing a sponsored stream actually with Dr. Christopher Lockwood on types and symbols in the Bible. This is a really good book. So anyways, tons of content to do, but smash that like. Thank you very much, Crispy. Hey, and major thank you to our mods. I want to give an appreciation right now for Dr. Crispy Johnson, formerly known as Dr. Crispy Rothschild. And I want to give a special thank you also to Kristen, Slowboy Whiteboard. You guys, I really appreciate you guys monitoring the chat. I really appreciate how you guys join when you're doing other stuff. I just really appreciate you guys and your support and how integral you are to the community over here. So I just want to say Merry Christmas. God bless Crispy and Kristen, Slowboy Whiteboard, all the mods. Those are the 2 mods that are here regularly. I appreciate you guys. God bless you. I love all you guys. And with that, I will catch you guys Sunday or Monday for a new stream. And wishing a Merry Christmas to all of you. Make sure, again, as I'm going to make emphatic in my stream on being a Christian supremacist, we do not say happy holidays here. We go out of our way to say Merry Christmas to everyone, especially immigrants that aren't Christian, because you're welcome to America. Merry Christmas. So anyways, God bless you all. And thanks again for everything. I'll see you in the next one. As always, until then, God bless.